Tired of carrying the same burden from one day into the next. Tired of waking with the old pressure still waiting for you. Tired of trying to speak beautifully to yourself while something in you still trembles. Tired of hoping, tired of enduring, tired of asking why what seems to work for others has remained so stubbornly delayed for you. Perhaps tonight you feel the weight of money, not as an idea, but as a pressure in the chest. Numbers that seem to follow you. Obligations that do not sleep when you sleep. Perhaps it is not money at all, but some other burden. A relationship that feels unresolved. A fear that returns in the dark. A life that outwardly appears unchanged, no matter how often you have tried to think positively, pray sincerely, or imagine a better outcome. Perhaps you have repeated affirmations until the words lost all warmth. Perhaps you have told yourself to be patient while inwardly becoming more discouraged. Perhaps you have begun many times with faith and ended many times with fatigue. I know that condition. I know what it is to look at the facts of life and feel them standing there like witnesses against your desire. I know what it is to say the right sentence and still feel dragged back by the old mood. I know what it is to want relief so badly that even the wanting becomes heavy. So I will not speak to you tonight in the language of mere encouragement. I will not ask you to cheer yourself up. I will not offer you hope in the ordinary sense, for hope, as most people use it, is often only delay made to sound respectable. I speak to you of law. Law is different from hope. Hope says perhaps. Law says if this is the state, this must be the result. Hope waits to see if life will be favorable. Law knows that life reflects the inner condition with exactness. Hope begs the outer world to change so the inner man may rest. Law teaches that when the inner man changes, the outer world must answer. And that is the first thing I want settled in you tonight. The universe does not respond to effort in the way men imagine. It responds to assumption. It responds to the state you accept as true within yourself. This is why so many remain exhausted. They have been taught that force is power. They have been taught that if they worry enough, work enough, plan enough, push enough, hold themselves together tightly enough, something will finally break in their favor. And because they believe that, they pour life into struggle and call it responsibility. They mistake tension for seriousness. They mistake anxiety for action. They mistake exhaustion for merit. But the universe is not moved by that. The universe is moved by state. Hear me closely now, because if you truly begin to feel this, something in you will loosen even before sleep takes you. The world outside you is not first cause. It is response. It is echo. It is the visible answer to the invisible position you occupy within yourself. That is why one man labors and sees little change, while another, entering a different inward state, finds that doors begin to move, people begin to respond, opportunities begin to appear, and the whole thing seems to unfold with a kind of naturalness that others call luck. It is not luck. It is law. It is always law. And because it is law, change need not be as far away as you have feared. The old mind thinks in terms of delay. It thinks this will take time, this will require years, this will demand a long battle. But that belongs to the world of surfaces. The law itself moves the instant the state is accepted. The bridge of outer events may unfold in sequence, yes, but the movement begins the moment the inner act is made real. That is why tonight matters. Not because there is something magical about a particular hour on the clock, but because tonight you may stop appealing to the world as a beggar and begin entering the state as the operant power. You did not come here by accident. Some part of you already suspects that there is something deeper beneath all this visible struggling. Some part of you already knows that there must be another way than simply carrying the old burden tomorrow and calling it realism. Some part of you has grown weary enough of outer pressure to become willing to listen for law. And that willingness matters. It matters more than you know. Because the moment a man becomes willing to stop worshipping appearances, he is very near the turning point. So let me say it plainly. You are not powerless tonight. You are not too late tonight. You are not disqualified because you have doubted before, failed before, feared before, or prayed badly before. Nothing is ruined. Nothing is beyond recall. The law has not abandoned you. If your world has seemed slow, it is not because the law forgot you. It is because you have been taught to approach it from the wrong direction, with strain where there should have been assumption, with pleading where there should have been possession, with effort where there should have been inward acceptance. Tonight, I do not want you to force the universe in the way the world understands force. I do not want you to strain, push, beg, or emotionally exhaust yourself. I want something much more powerful than that. I want you to enter the state that leaves the universe no choice but to respond. For that is the only true forcing there is. When the state is assumed, the response must follow. Not because you dominated life, because you entered law. So remain with me now. Do not rush ahead for a formula. Do not ask yet for the final sentence or the final act. Those will come in their proper place. First, I want this deeper foundation to settle into you. Your pain is not being ignored. Your discouragement is not being mocked. I know the weariness of wanting change and seeing only the old facts stare back at you, but I also know that facts are shadows, and shadows do not command. They follow. They always follow. Therefore, something can shift very quickly from this night onward, if you understand what you are doing. Not because I wish to excite you, but because it is the nature of law to respond when it is rightly approached. And tonight, if you will listen with me a little longer, not with strain, not with fear, but with a quiet willingness, you may begin to feel that what seemed so fixed is not so fixed after all, that what seemed delayed may be nearer than you thought, that what seemed impossible may only have been waiting for the right inward state. Stay with me. Let the old burden rest for a moment. Let the idea enter you that perhaps the universe can answer more quickly than you imagined, not because life suddenly became sentimental, but because law is exact, and law can move the very moment you stop asking from lack and begin assuming from the end. Now I must take from you, gently but completely, one of the great false gods by which men have kept themselves powerless. I speak of luck. I do not wish to offend anyone by saying this, nor do I say it to strip away a comfort without offering something truer in its place. I say it because as long as a man believes in luck, he will continue to believe that the causes of his life lie outside himself. And the moment he places the cause outside himself, he becomes a spectator to his own experience, waiting, hoping, fearing, blaming, enduring, but never truly understanding. Men say he was fortunate. They say she happened to meet the right person. They say it was simply not my time. They say some are born under better stars. And they say these things because they do not see the hidden order beneath appearances. They look at the visible event and not knowing its invisible cause, they call it chance. They see one life rising and another sinking, one door opening and another closing, one man remembered and another overlooked. And because they do not understand the inward law that precedes all such happenings, they give the whole mystery the careless name of luck. But luck is only law not yet understood. That is all it is. What appears random to the surface mind is often precise correspondence seen too late. What appears accidental is often the outer expression of a state long entertained inwardly. The universe is not a gambler. It is not careless. It does not throw blessings and burdens at men as though tossing stones into a crowd. It is exact. It is obedient. It is responsive. This is why I ask you to begin thinking differently tonight. Not sentimentally, not superstitiously, but psychologically, lawfully. Your life is not a series of disconnected accidents. It is not a heap of unrelated moments. It is not an unpredictable storm into which you were thrown defenseless. Life responds. That word must become alive in you. Life responds. The universe is not chaotic. It is reflective. It is not emotional in the way men are emotional. It does not pity one and neglect another. It does not become moody. It does not grow partial. It answers the state that is occupied. There is great relief in this, if you really hear it. At first it may seem severe, because men are accustomed to hiding inside the idea of chance. Chance allows one to remain vague. Chance allows one to say, it happened to me. Chance allows one to accuse life of unfairness while never asking what inward posture was being reflected. But once you begin to see law, a very different feeling enters. You no longer stand before life as one waiting for random mercy. You begin to see that there is order, that there is correspondence, that there is an unbroken relationship between the state within and the world without. The world says chance. I say correspondence. The world says randomness. I say reflected state. The world says some are favored and some are forgotten. I say the universe mirrors what is inwardly accepted with terrifying and glorious fidelity. And I use both words deliberately because it is terrifying when one first realizes how faithfully the world has been answering old fear, old lack, old identity. But it is glorious when one realizes that the same law which has reflected bondage can reflect freedom with equal obedience. Consider for a moment how powerless the believer in luck must always remain. If life is chance, then there is no inner science. If life is random, then there is nothing to master but waiting. If life is favoritism, then one must always look outward for approval, permission, opportunity, rescue. Such a man becomes a beggar before appearances. He studies circumstances as though they were kings. He trembles before delays. He resents the success of others. He fears bad timing. He calls some doors lucky and some doors unlucky. Inwardly, he lives at the mercy of what he does not understand. But the man who begins to see law undergoes a quiet revolution. He may not yet know how to use it perfectly, but already he has ceased being merely the victim of appearances. He begins to suspect that what he called fate may have been state. He begins to notice that similar inner moods have often been followed by similar outer conditions. He begins to see why fear seems to invite more reasons for fear, why relief often precedes openings, why the one who inwardly assumes rejection finds rejection in many costumes, and why the one who begins to move in quiet worthiness seems to encounter a different world entirely. Life is not chaotic but responsive. Let that settle into you. Responsive, if you lean inwardly toward fear, life answers in that direction. If you lean inwardly toward lack, life arranges its evidence accordingly. If you lean inwardly toward safety, worth, provision, acceptance, relief, then slowly or swiftly, according to the degree of acceptance, life begins to bear witness to that too. Not because the universe has emotions to spare for you, but because it is exact in its mirroring. It responds to your inward consent. This is why I tell you that the universe is exact, not emotional. Men often imagine that because their lives have been difficult, life itself has been hostile. Because they have suffered delay, they conclude that life is withholding. Because they have known disappointment, they believe the world is unfair. But the universe is not offended, not pleased, not persuaded, not insulted. It reflects. It simply reflects. The mirror does not hate the face. It does not bless the face. It shows the face. And so the outer world, however dramatic it appears, is in its deeper nature a mirror to the inner arrangement of consciousness. Once this begins to dawn upon you, your language changes. You stop speaking of yourself as unlucky. You stop saying, "Nothing ever works for me," as though you were describing a cosmic sentence passed upon your life. You begin to ask instead, "What state have I accepted that keeps being answered?" And that is a nobler question, a more useful question, a more liberating question. For the moment you ask that, you have already begun to move from victimhood to operant power. That phrase, operant power, must mean something to you tonight. I do not use it casually. The operant power is the active cause. It is not the outer event. It is not the visible condition. It is not the so-called luck of the day. It is the state of consciousness that precedes the event and calls it forth. When you identify yourself as the operant power, you stop pleading with effects. You stop worshipping shadows. You stop asking the world to change first, so that you may at last feel secure. Instead, you begin the work where creation truly begins, within. I know the ordinary mind resists this at first. It says, "But what about all the things that seem to happen by accident? What about the unforeseen meeting, the unexpected letter, the chance opening, the sudden disappointment?" And I answer, unforeseen by whom? Unexpected to what part of you? Chance to the conscious mind, perhaps. But the conscious mind is often the last to know what states have been seeded and are now bearing fruit. The visible event may surprise the surface self while remaining entirely lawful in relation to the deeper state that has been entertained. You have seen this in small ways, whether you named it or not. You have had mornings where for no outer reason you felt heavy, defeated, braced, and before the day was done, the world seemed to provide echoes of that very mood. A conversation turned sour. A delay annoyed you. A fear found evidence. And on other days, perhaps rarer, perhaps more easily overlooked, you awoke lighter, quieter, less defended, and the day seemed somehow easier, kinder, more open. Did chance change so quickly? Did the world roll dice between sunrise and noon? Or was it rather that state preceded experience more faithfully than you had noticed? The believer in chance remains blind to these correspondences. The student of law begins to trace them. And once he traces them, he begins to understand that what appears outside is not self-originated. It is reflected, not always in a crude one-to-one fashion the way a child might imagine it, but lawfully, atmospherically, symbolically, sequentially through what I have called the bridge of incidents. Yet always there is response. Always there is some correspondence between what is inwardly lived and what is outwardly met. So I say again, not to burden you, but to free you. Your life is not random. What seemed like luck may have been law. What seemed like fate may have been state. What seemed like punishment may have been reflection. And if that is true, then no outward sentence is final. For if the cause were truly outside you, you would be helpless. But if the cause is inward, then change is always nearer than appearance suggests. This is the great mercy hidden inside the severity of law. Law does not flatter you, but it does not abandon you either. It does not say, you are doomed by your history. It says, show me the state, and I will show you the world. It does not say, wait for fortune to smile. It says, occupy the condition, and the reflection must follow. It does not say, beg for favor. It says, become inwardly that which you seek, and life will answer in its appointed way. The old way is helplessness. The new way is responsibility without self-condemnation, power without strain, authorship without vanity. You are not being asked tonight to blame yourself for every former difficulty. Such blame would only be another state, another bondage. You are being asked to see more deeply, to see that the universe is not a field of scattered accidents, but a responsive medium, to see that what men call chance is often their ignorance of correspondence, to see that once the inward position changes, life itself begins to rearrange because it cannot help but answer the new state. So let this settle into you now with quiet force. My life is not random. The universe is not chaotic. What I called luck may have been law I did not yet understand. And because it is law, I need not remain the victim of what I once believed was chance. Already, in seeing this, the old helplessness begins to loosen. Already something in you begins to stand differently. Already you are moving from the one to whom things merely happen into the one from whom life takes its cue. Remain there a little longer. Let the old superstition of luck fade. Let the deeper idea of law begin to warm you. The universe responds. It always has. And the more clearly you understand that, the less you will tremble before appearances, because you will begin to know that behind all seeming accident there is an order, and behind that order there is state, and state is where your true power begins. Now I must ask you to release another false master, one almost everyone serves without knowing it. I speak of time. Men bow before time as though it were creative. They speak of it with a kind of helpless reverence. They say, it takes time. They say, perhaps later. They say, I must be patient and wait for the right season. And because they believe that time produces change, they remain always at the mercy of tomorrow. But time has no creative power, none. Time does not create. Time does not heal. Time does not provide. Time does not restore. Time does not open doors. Time merely measures the movement of things already set in motion by a deeper cause. It is a shadow upon the wall, useful perhaps for the arrangement of daily affairs, but utterly powerless as a cause. Yet men treat it as though it were a god. They say one day it will happen. They postpone the thing in feeling, and then they wonder why the world faithfully postpones it in fact. This is one of the greatest inversions in human life. Men believe that if enough time passes, change will somehow be born from the passing itself. But passing is not creating. Delay is not gestation by necessity. Often what men call time is only wavering stretched out over days, weeks, months, and years. They imagine the end for a moment, yes, then return to fear. They feel the wish fulfilled for an instant, then rise the next morning measuring appearances and asking, where is it? They plant and then uproot. They consent and then withdraw consent. They assume and then retreat into the old identity. And because this inward instability continues, they call the result delay, and then they blame time. But the law acts the instant the state is accepted. That must be clear in you tonight. The law does not hesitate. It does not say, let me think about this for several weeks. It does not take counsel with circumstance. It does not ask whether the world is ready. The moment a state is inwardly accepted as natural, as true, as already so, the creative act is done. At that moment, the command is given. At that moment, the seed is alive. At that moment, the bridge begins. This does not mean that the whole outer world always rearranges itself before your eyes in one dramatic instant. No, the law responds immediately, but the outer sequence appears through what I have called the bridge of incidents. That bridge may include days, conversations, detours, openings, closures, impulses, invitations, seemingly small shifts. But do not mistake the sequence for the cause. The sequence is the unfolding. The cause was the accepted state. The bridge is the shadow catching up to the substance. The act itself was immediate. Hear that very slowly. The act itself is immediate. It is not growing more true with time. It is already true in consciousness, the moment you have entered the state. What then appears in the world is simply the orderly unfolding of a fact already accepted within. This is why obsession with when is so destructive. For the question when almost always implies it is not yet. And what is the subconscious to do with that? It must continue to reflect not yet. So when a man says, "Why is it taking so long?" he often reveals the very state that prolongs it. He is looking to the senses for confirmation before he grants reality to the inner act. He is asking the mirror to move first. He is saying, in effect, "I will believe in the state once the world proves it." But this reverses the law. The world does not prove the state first. The state is accepted first, and the world proves obedient afterward. Let me make this plain in the gentlest possible way. The real delay is often not in the law. The real delay is in our own repeated return to doubt. We enter the feeling at night and undo it in the morning with anxious checking. We say, "It is done." Then spend the day confessing with every reaction that it is not done at all. We speak of trust, yet inwardly we keep returning to the old wound, the old fear, the old arithmetic of lack. We keep touching the old bruise and then asking why it still hurts. This is wavering. This is the hidden cause of so much so-called waiting. I do not say this to condemn you, never. I say it to free you. For if time were truly the cause, you would be trapped inside it. If delay were truly outside you, you would be helpless before it. But if delay is often the result of wavering, then the remedy is immediate. Loyalty to the accepted state. Quiet, inward loyalty. Not emotional strain. Not forced positivity. Loyalty. The simple refusal to keep withdrawing your own consent from the thing you have already planted. Think of it this way. A man may decide to cross a room. The decision is made in an instant, though his footsteps take a little while to carry the body across the floor. We do not say the decision itself required the length of the walk. We understand the distinction. So it is with the imaginal act. The acceptance of the end is immediate. The bridge of incidents is the crossing. Time belongs to the crossing, not to the decision. And yet most men stare at the floorboards as they walk and say, "Perhaps I have not truly decided after all, because I am not yet at the far wall." They confuse movement with cause. They confuse unfolding with uncertainty. This is why the wise become less fascinated by time and more faithful to state. They do not ask every hour whether the law has remembered them. They do not count days as though counting were creation. They do not worship duration. They understand that outer life has its sequence. Yes, but sequence is not sovereignty. The sovereignty belongs to the accepted state. Once that is clear, one begins to breathe differently. One stops leaning so desperately into tomorrow. One ceases to make a tyrant of the calendar. Now I know the mind resists this because the senses are trained to say, "But if I do not see it, how can I call it done?" Yet that is precisely why so many remain in bondage to time. They have handed reality over to appearances. They have made the visible world the judge of the invisible act. But the visible world is always the last witness. It comes after. It is late by nature. It is the echo, not the voice. And so I ask you to consider a different relationship to time tonight. Not hatred of it, not impatience with it, but a dethroning of it. Let time go back to being what it is, a measure of unfolding, not a maker of outcomes. Let it lose its false majesty. Let it cease being the thing you fear. For the moment you no longer believe that time is the cause, the whole inner posture changes. You stop saying, "It will happen one day," and begin asking, "Can I accept it now?" You stop stretching your desire across distance and begin clothing yourself with it in the present. You stop waiting for life to be ripe enough and begin entering the state from which ripeness appears. There is also great tenderness in this, for many are more tired from waiting than from the desire itself. It is the waiting that has bruised them, the constant measuring, the repeated looking, the inward question that never seems to sleep. When? But if the act itself is immediate, then you are not as far away as you thought. If the seed is planted the moment the state is accepted, then perhaps what you call delay is not the absence of response, but the quiet bridge already forming beyond the inspection of your anxious mind. So let the obsession with when soften now. Let it loosen its hold on your chest. Let the old reverence for time begin to dissolve. You need not solve the whole future tonight. You need not know the hour, or the channel, or the exact arrangement of events. You need only know this. When the state is truly accepted, the law has already answered. The rest is bridge. The rest is sequence. The rest is the natural unfolding of what was done in the moment of assumption. And perhaps this alone will let you rest more deeply tonight. It may not be taking as long as you think. The law may have already moved where your senses still see only stillness. The bridge may have already begun while the old self still asks for proof. The real delay may indeed have been your own return to doubt, your own repeated stepping out of the state to question whether the state was real. But that can end. It can end in this hour. So tonight begin to think differently. Time is not the cause. The accepted state is the cause. The bridge may appear step by step, yes, but the inner act is immediate. The law responds at once. Therefore, do not give your life over to calendars and clocks and anxious counting. Give yourself instead to the quiet fidelity of assumption. Let the bridge belong to the law. Let the unfolding belong to the law. Let your part be simpler than the old mind imagined. Accept the end. Remain inwardly loyal. And let time become only what it was ever meant to be, the shadow of an already accomplished act. I do not ask you to accept this because it sounds beautiful. Beauty alone changes nothing. I do not ask you to believe it because it is comforting. Comfort is not proof. I ask you to consider it because I have lived it, and because once a thing has been lived in consciousness and then seen in fact, it ceases to be theory. It becomes memory. It becomes certainty. It becomes one of those inward knowings a man cannot honestly betray once he has seen it work. There was a time in my own life when the whole outer arrangement of things denied the desire I held within me. I was not speaking then from a place of ease. I was not surrounded by visible proof. I was not in possession of the means. If I had judged by circumstances alone, I would have said, as so many say, that the matter must wait, that perhaps one day it would happen if fortune were favorable, that perhaps in some later season life would soften and permit what I wanted. But I had begun to understand something that changed the entire basis of my life. I had begun to understand that the outer world is never the true beginning of anything. It is only the delayed witness. I longed to be in Barbados. I do not mean that I held a vague sentiment or a passing preference. I mean that I wanted to stand again in the atmosphere of that place, among the familiar voices, the remembered streets, the climate that belonged to my first world. And outwardly there was no reason to assume I could go. The means were not there. The arrangements were not there. By the standards of common sense, there was no path open before me. If I had consulted appearances, I would have postponed the whole thing. If I had asked reason to approve first, I would have remained where I was. But I had learned that reason is not the creative power. Imagination is. And so I did not say, one day I shall return. That sentence would have exiled the desire to some future that never truly arrives. I did not say, I hope a way appears. Hope in that form would have kept me separated from fulfillment. I did not ask, how shall this happen? For that question belongs to the senses, and the senses know nothing of the bridge until they are standing upon it. Instead, I assumed the end. Night after night, as the body grew quiet, and the world began to fade from immediate authority, I entered in imagination, not the journey, but the arrival. I did not occupy myself with ships or tickets or money or intermediaries. I did not imagine explanations. I did not concern myself with channels. I went straight to the fulfilled state. I felt myself there. I let the place become present to me, not as a distant scene I was watching. I felt the reality of home. I heard the tones of familiar life. I moved in that atmosphere as one who was already there. That is important. I did not imagine myself getting there. I imagined myself being there. The difference is everything. Getting there still carries becoming. Being there carries fulfillment. And what I wanted was not the process. I wanted the end. So I slept in the end. Night after night, I fell asleep in Barbados, while the body remained elsewhere. I did not try to strain it into being. I entered it and rested. Now, what happened next did not look miraculous in the cheap way men often demand miracles to look. There was no thunder, no spectacle, no interruption of natural law. There was only something far more convincing, the ordinary rearrangement of life after the state had been accepted. A letter came, assistance appeared, money was made available, passage was arranged. The means unfolded in a manner so natural that anyone living only by the senses might have called it fortunate. But I knew better. I knew that what the world calls fortunate is often simply the bridge appearing after the end has already been accepted in consciousness. And because I knew the inner act preceded the outer sequence, I could not call it luck. It was not luck. It was not delayed generosity from the world. It was not chance deciding at last to smile. It was law fulfilling itself. The end had been assumed. The bridge had formed. The outer world, which had seemed so solid in its denial, yielded as naturally as a shadow yields when the substance has moved. I tell you that story not merely because it is known, but because it remains one of the clearest examples of what I mean when I say the means are never your concern. Men waste years worshipping means. They ask, who will help me? What path will open? Where will the money come from? Which person must change? And in all that questioning, they remain outside the state, studying the road instead of occupying the destination. But when the destination is inwardly accepted, the road takes care of itself, not always visibly at once, but lawfully, inevitably, often with a naturalness that surprises the very one who set it in motion. I have seen this not only in my own life, but in the lives of many who truly understood and applied the principle. I recall a man who came to me burdened by financial pressure, the sort that makes a man feel as though the walls themselves are beginning to close around him. He had worked hard, he had worried much, he had spoken many good words, but all from the posture of one still waiting to be rescued. He wanted freedom, but he continued to feel himself under the hand of debt. And because he felt himself there, life kept echoing it. I did not tell him to devise a plan. I did not tell him to stare longer at his books or repeat endless formulas through the day. I asked him instead what freedom would feel like if the matter were already settled. At first he answered in the way men often do, from the head rather than from the state. He spoke of amounts, balances, arrangements. I brought him back quietly and asked again, how would you feel? And after a little while he said, relieved, quiet, as though I could breathe again. There it was. Not the arithmetic of freedom, but the feeling. So I told him, then tonight do not pray for money. Pray from relief. Fall asleep not as the man who needs escape, but as the man whose burden is already lifted. It sounded too simple to him, as it often does to those trained in struggle. But he did it. He ceased imagining the crisis and entered the mood that would follow its resolution. He let relief, not panic, be the final thing he took into sleep. In a short time, events began to move. I do not mean that gold rained from heaven. I mean something more convincing. Conversations shifted. An opportunity appeared. A channel opened that he had not foreseen. What had been stuck began to loosen. The matter, which seemed immovable while he was inwardly braced against it, began to resolve once he changed the state from which he was living. Again, the outer sequence appeared natural, but the cause was not natural in the common sense. It was imaginal. It was inward. It was law. And I remember also a woman who desired reconciliation, but everything in the outer world seemed to speak of distance. Had she lived by appearances, she would have concluded the matter finished. But she came with enough softness in her to hear another possibility. I asked her not to analyze the rupture, not to rehearse the injury, not to ask how another person might be changed. I asked her instead to enter the feeling of peace already restored, to hear inwardly the tone she longed to hear, to accept the relationship in its healed condition before sleep, and to cease bowing to the visible evidence of separation. She did not accomplish this perfectly on the first night. Few do. But she returned, gently, faithfully, not as one forcing reality, but as one learning to dwell in another state. And then one day a letter came, later a conversation, then softening, then movement. The old situation, which had seemed so fixed while she remained identified with hurt, began to rearrange when the hurt ceased being the state from which she prayed. Again I say to you, this is not poetry, this is law. You see, when one has watched these things happen many times, one can no longer be impressed by the arguments of the senses. The senses always arrive late and then speak loudly, as though they were first cause. They tell you, look at the facts. They say, this is the condition. They insist upon their version of reality because they know nothing of the imaginal act that preceded the visible form. But once you have seen the law work, truly seen it, you understand that facts are frozen thoughts, states made visible, yesterday's inward assumptions wearing today's clothing. This is why I speak calmly tonight, not because I take your pain lightly, but because I know it is not final. I know the world can appear terribly convincing when it contradicts your desire. I know the senses can mock you with their evidence. But I also know, from experience lived and witnessed, that the moment the end is accepted, the old arrangement begins to weaken, whether or not the senses can yet detect it. Something has already shifted at the level of cause, and once cause has shifted, effect must follow. What I want you to take from these remembered things is not merely admiration for a principle, but trust. Not blind trust, but trust born of the fact that this teaching has been lived. I am not giving you borrowed philosophy. I am not passing on a charm or a superstition. I am speaking of something I have tested in the pressure of actual conditions, in times when the outer world offered no encouragement, in moments where common sense would have said, wait, and imagination said, assume, and imagination was right. So when I say to you that the means are not your concern, I do not say it because it sounds mystical. I say it because the means have never been the true concern. The means are the bridge. The bridge belongs to the law once the end is accepted. Your task is simpler, deeper, and more decisive than the world has taught you. Your task is to enter the state, to feel it real, to dwell there especially in the sacred softness before sleep, to stop asking the shadow to lead, to let the unseen arrange what the seen cannot yet explain. This is not just philosophy. I have seen it work. I have lived it. I have watched men and women move out of conditions that reason declared fixed, not because they overpowered the world outwardly, but because they accepted another world inwardly. And when that inward world became natural enough, the outer one began, quietly and obediently, to conform. That is why I speak with certainty. Not the certainty of argument, but the certainty of memory. And I want that same certainty for you. Not because you should borrow mine forever, but because in time, if you apply this faithfully, you will have your own remembered proofs. You will look back upon some turning point in your life and say, that was not chance, that was not luck, that was the law answering the state I had accepted. And once you can say that honestly from experience, the whole texture of your life changes. You no longer fear appearances in the same way. You no longer worship time. You no longer kneel before means. You begin to live from the center. And that, my friend, is where real authority begins. Now we come to one of the great turning points in all this teaching. And if you truly hear it, not merely with the ears, but with that deeper recognition that feels almost like remembrance, then you will begin to understand why so many sincere people remain trapped in delay while believing they are practicing faith. The difference is contained in two small arrangements of words, I will and I am. Most men live from I will. They may not know it, but they do. They say, I will be free, I will be secure, I will be loved, I will be prosperous, I will be at peace, I will get there. I will finally become the man or woman I long to be. They speak this way with good intentions, often with much sincerity, sometimes even with tears. And because the words sound hopeful, they imagine they are moving toward fulfillment. But psychologically, spiritually, creatively, they are doing something very different. They are placing the desire ahead of themselves. They are clothing it in tomorrow. They are fastening it to distance. And the subconscious does not create from distance. It does not know tomorrow in the way the reasoning mind imagines tomorrow. It knows only the state accepted now. It knows only identity. It knows only what you are being in the present tense of consciousness. So when you say, I will be, what are you really saying now? Quietly, secretly, beneath the hopeful surface, you are confessing, I am not. That is the hidden wound inside future tense. When you say, I will be wealthy, the subconscious hears the present confession before it hears the future promise. It hears, I am not wealthy now. When you say, I will be loved, it hears, I am not loved now. When you say, I will be secure, it hears, I am not secure now. And because the subconscious is obedient to present identity, not future desire, it continues to reproduce the very not being you are confessing. This is why so many have mistaken longing for faith. They have thought that because they are looking toward the desired thing with hope, they are doing the work. But hope, when it is rooted in future tense, is often only refined postponement. It is still separation. It is still the soul standing outside the house, speaking lovingly of the room it has not yet entered. It is still promise without possession. It is still waiting dressed in noble language. The difference between waiting and presence is the whole difference between delay and creation. Waiting says, it will come. Presence says, it is. Waiting stretches life across distance. Presence gathers life into now. Waiting tells the subconscious the thing is elsewhere. Presence tells the subconscious the thing is here in identity, here in feeling, here in accepted being. And the subconscious, being timeless, being immediate, being unable to create from a distance it does not itself inhabit, responds only to presence. That is why I am is the creative center. Not because it is a charming phrase, not because it is a spiritual ornament, but because it is the doorway into being. Before you can say what you desire, before you can name what you fear, before you can call yourself fortunate or unfortunate, blessed or burdened, loved or abandoned, you must first silently say, I am. It is the root of all self-definition. It is the fountainhead. It is the place from which all states are clothed and worn. I say to you in the tone in which I have long said it, I am is the name of God in man. I do not mean that in some distant theological way meant only for church walls and sacred buildings. I mean it psychologically, experientially, creatively. God is your awareness of being. God is not first something external to be begged. God is the living sense of I am within you, the operant presence that can clothe itself in any state and bring that state forth into visibility. So when you say I am, you stand at the very center of creation, and whatever you join to that center becomes your lived world. If you join fear to it, fear becomes world. If you join poverty to it, poverty becomes world. If you join neglect to it, neglect becomes world. If you join peace to it, peace becomes world. If you join safety to it, safety begins to take form. If you join provision to it, provision begins to unfold. The words that follow I am are not idle, they are garments laid upon the living presence, and the living presence then outpictures the garment. This is why I say men have often been praying against themselves without knowing it. They say, I want abundance, but inwardly they keep wearing, I am lacking. They say, I desire love, but inwardly they keep wearing, I am unchosen. They say, I long for freedom, but inwardly they keep wearing, I am trapped. Then they wonder why the world continues to mirror what they do not want. But the subconscious is not confused. It is not listening to the wish as much as to the identity. It hears the I am beneath the longing, and it obeys that. Consider how many careless decrees men make in a day without realizing their creative nature. I am behind. I am unlucky. I am never chosen. I am under pressure. I am tired of life. I am forgotten. I am not one of the fortunate ones. Each of these seems to the speaker like a description, a report, an innocent statement of present feeling. But they are more than that. They are self-namings. They are inner baptisms into a state. They are creative decrees. And because they are joined to I am, they carry far more power than passing thoughts. Now perhaps you begin to see why future tense has kept so many in the wilderness. They have believed in promise, but not in possession. They have said one day, they have made a religion of eventually. They have stood before the land and spoken of entering it tomorrow, and tomorrow, as men ordinarily use it, never arrives. For when tomorrow comes, it comes only as another now. If in that now the identity has not changed, the same confession continues and the same life is echoed. So the pivot must happen here, not later, here. You must cease speaking of yourself as one who will someday arrive and begin to know yourself as one who is. That does not mean you must lie to the senses in a crude or theatrical way. It means you must begin inwardly to shift the name you wear. The one who says, I will be free, still stands in chains in consciousness. The one who says, I am free, begins at once to loosen the inner chain. The one who says, I will be provided for, remains in want at the center. The one who says, I am provided for, begins to live from another root. This does not have to be loud. In fact, the deepest movements are seldom loud. I am is quiet. It is intimate. It is not performance. It is identity. It is the feeling of being before it, is the speech of becoming. That is why the shift into I am changes creation itself. The moment you leave promise and enter possession, the subconscious is given a different command. The moment you stop waiting for yourself and begin naming yourself anew, the whole movement of life alters. Not always in outer spectacle that same instant. No, But at the level of cause, at the level from which all outer sequence proceeds, the command is different. Creation begins differently, because identity is different. I want you to hear the contrast slowly. I will is waiting. I am is presence. I will is promise. I am is possession. I will says not yet. I am says now. I will confesses separation. I am enters union. I will keeps the state at a distance. I am clothes the state upon the soul. And the subconscious, loyal only to the state you occupy, responds to I am with immediate creative power. This is why I ask you tonight to become more reverent with your inner naming. Listen to yourself, not only what you say aloud to others, but what you silently say when no one hears. Listen especially in weariness, in disappointment, in the late hour when you are not performing strength for the world. What do you join to I am when you are alone? For there, very often, the true state is revealed, and once it is revealed, it may be changed. You need not condemn yourself for old namings. That would only be another state. You need only become aware enough to withdraw from them and clothe yourself anew. You may have worn I am burdened for years. Very well. It is still only a garment. You may have worn I am delayed. I am rejected. I am unsupported. Very well. Still garments. The wearer is deeper than the garment. The presence is deeper than the state. And because the presence is free, it may put on another state. That is the freedom hidden in I am. It is not merely the name of God in man. It is the doorway out of every old bondage. For if what follows I am can be chosen, then destiny is no longer a prison handed down by outer circumstance. It becomes the visible flowering of inward identification. Change the identification, and in time the world, which has no choice but to reflect the deeper naming, must change with it. So let this feel revelatory now, but also practical. You have not merely been waiting for fulfillment. You have often been delaying it by speaking of it in future tense. You have often been promising yourself what the subconscious could only create when accepted as present identity. And the moment you shift into I am, the whole law receives a different instruction. You cease wandering in the promise of one day and begin entering the possession of now. That is why this matters so deeply before sleep. In the soft borderland, where resistance weakens, what you join to I am sinks more easily into the deeper self. Not I will be safe, I am safe. Not I will be loved, I am loved. Not I will be provided for, I am provided for. Not because you are trying to deceive yourself, but because you are accepting inwardly what you choose to experience outwardly. You are naming yourself from the end. And when that happens, even softly, even imperfectly at first, creation begins differently. The old current is interrupted. The old wilderness begins to lose its hold. The old delay is no longer continually fed. Something else is planted, something present, something alive, something that the subconscious, hearing identity rather than promise, can actually bring forth. So if you have felt up to now that life has remained just ahead of you, that peace has remained just beyond reach, that supply has remained always in another day, perhaps now you begin to understand why. You have not merely desired the thing, you have too often named yourself apart from it. And the remedy is not more desperate hoping. The remedy is I am, quietly, faithfully, inwardly. I am joined to the state you wish to embody. The moment that happens, fulfillment is no longer merely wished for. It begins to be inhabited, and when it is inhabited, the law is no longer being asked to bring you something from far away. It is being commanded to mirror what you have already accepted as your present name. Now let me take you deeper. For if you truly understand what I am about to say, you will begin to treat your inner life with a kind of reverence you may never have known before. The subconscious is the womb of creation. I do not use that as ornament. I do not say it for beauty alone. I say it because it is the most exact description of how life is formed. The conscious mind selects, it turns its attention, it chooses a scene, a phrase, a meaning, a state, but the subconscious receives, and once it receives, it begins to bring forth after the nature of what it has received. This is why I tell you that every deeply felt mood is a seed. Not every passing thought, not every faint notion that drifts by and is gone, but every thought accepted with feeling, every inner word clothed in emotional reality, every state entered with the sense of, this is true of me, these are seeds. And the subconscious, like a fertile womb, takes the seed and begins its hidden work. It does not announce the process. It does not ask your conscious permission every hour. It does not stop to consult the world of appearances. It receives and then it reproduces. This is both the warning and the glory. It is warning because much of what men and women suffer has been conceived without their knowing. Not because they are wicked, not because they intended harm, but because they did not understand the fertility of their own deeper mind. They lay down at night and carry fear with them as though fear were only a passing visitor. They rehearse humiliation. They replay arguments. They count what they lack. They imagine tomorrow as an extension of yesterday's burden. They whisper to themselves, perhaps not with the lips but in feeling, I am trapped. I am unsupported. It will not change. I cannot manage. I am alone in this. And because those inner acts are felt, the subconscious receives them as instructions. Then, in its perfect faithfulness, it begins to bring forth their likeness. Not because it is cruel, not because life is against you, not because some external force delights in your discomfort, but because the subconscious does not judge the seed. It reproduces it. It does not say, this fear is unworthy of manifestation, I shall ignore it. It does not say, this resentment is harmful, I shall refuse it. It does not say, this mood is beneath your dignity, I will spare you its harvest. No, it receives and brings forth. It is exact, impartial, fertile. You must understand the tenderness and the seriousness of that. The subconscious is not moral in the way men use morality. It is not offended. It is not impressed by speeches. It is not persuaded by your outer performance. It accepts what is felt as true, and then it shapes the outer world to correspond. So worry is conception. Resentment is conception. The constant inward rehearsal of lack is conception. These are not harmless states, simply because they are common. Common does not mean powerless. Indeed, what is most common often becomes most powerful, because it is repeated without question. Many people think they are merely going over things in their mind. They do not realize that when those inner rehearsals are joined to feeling, they are planting. They are sowing into the fertile depths. A woman remembers an insult again and again before sleep, and every time she feels the sting anew, she plants the sting again. A man counts his debts and inwardly bows before them with dread, and every night he conceives more of the same burdened state. Another lies in bed, imagining the next disappointment before it has happened, and in doing so he joins imagination to fear, and plants the seed of tomorrow's evidence. And then they wake and call the day difficult, not knowing that during the night they entered the womb of creation, carrying the very feeling they now meet in visible form. That is why what you take into sleep is not harmless. This is one of the great revelations. The last feeling before sleep is not a loose thread floating into darkness. It is often a seed descending into fertile ground. Sleep does not make it harmless. Sleep may deepen it. Sleep may seal it. Sleep is not merely rest. It is reception. It is gestation. It is the chamber where accepted feeling descends from conscious notice into deeper law. I do not say this so that you become frightened of your own mind. Fear of thought is only another bondage, another seed, another form of strain. I do not want that for you. I want authority, not fear. There is a great difference. The fearful person watches every thought with panic and thereby gives thought even more power. The understanding person becomes deliberate. He becomes careful in the holy sense, not the anxious sense. He begins to realize that what he entertains in feeling, especially before sleep, matters immensely. And because it matters, he no longer enters the night carelessly. Think of a mother who understands conception. She does not panic at every passing impression, but she becomes aware of the sacredness of what is being received. So too must you become aware of what the subconscious receives. Not rigid, not tense, aware, deliberate, gentle, but clear. You are no longer allowed the childish luxury of thinking that your moods are inconsequential. They are not. They are formative. They are generative. They are often more creative than the loud declarations you make by day because they sink deeper. And because the subconscious receives without judging, there is immense hope in this too. For if fear can be conceived, so can relief. If resentment can be planted, so can peace. If lack can be reproduced, so can provision. If you have unknowingly conceived a troubled life through troubled feeling, you may knowingly conceive another kind of life through another kind of feeling. That is the glory hidden inside the warning. The same fertility that has given shape to old burdens is available tonight for another state altogether. So do not leave this section of the teaching merely burdened by the idea that your night thoughts matter. Let it open into something much more beautiful. You can conceive a different life tonight, not by force, not by theatrical positivity, not by long strain, by selecting a different feeling and allowing it to be received. The subconscious does not demand complexity, it demands reality. It asks only what is true in feeling, and whatever you answer with your accepted state, it begins to bring forth. That is why I say every deeply felt mood is a seed, relief is a seed, safety is a seed. Gratitude is a seed. The calm of already having is a seed. The feeling of being supported is a seed. The inward atmosphere of being chosen, provided for, guided, healed, restored, these are seeds too. And once received, they begin to organize life from within outward. The outer world may not instantly reveal all that has begun, but in the hidden chambers the work is already underway. The seed does not announce its rooting, it roots. The womb does not explain its labor. The subconscious does not negotiate. It receives and reproduces. This is why I have said again and again that the hour before sleep is sacred, because at that hour the conscious guard weakens, the mind ceases some of its arguing, the body softens, the senses lower their noise, and into that softer region a feeling may pass with greater ease and greater depth. What you could not fully persuade yourself of at noon through effort, you may gently impress at night through feeling. What the surface mind resisted in broad daylight, the deeper self may receive in the quiet of drowsiness. And once received there, it no longer remains merely an idea, it becomes instruction. Now be very exact with me here. The subconscious does not reproduce your passing wish, it reproduces your accepted mood. A man may wish for wealth while continuing to feel poor, and the subconscious reproduces poverty. A woman may wish for love while feeling rejected, and the subconscious reproduces rejection. Another may wish for health while inwardly identifying with fear and fragility, and the subconscious reproduces that very identification. So wishing is not enough, yearning is not enough, wanting is not enough. Feeling is the act of conception. Feeling is what joins the chosen idea to the fertile depth. And because this is so, you must begin to ask yourself a different question at night. Not, what do I want? But what am I conceiving? That is the deeper question. What am I conceiving tonight? Am I conceiving another day of the old burden by taking fear into sleep? Am I conceiving more delay by going to bed in not yet? Am I conceiving another wound by replaying the old humiliation? Or am I conceiving peace, relief, the end, possession, completion? This changes everything. It makes the inner life consequential. It makes the night no longer a place where one simply collapses beneath the day. It makes bedtime an act of spiritual and psychological selection. It makes you more deliberate, more inwardly clean, more careful with the final mood in which you drift away, not because you fear punishment, but because you understand generation. You will begin now to see why many wake to the same life. They did not merely happen to it again, they conceived it again. They went to bed in the old conversation, the old fear, the old identity, and the subconscious, faithful and fertile, brought forth another harvest of the same kind. But now you begin to understand that this may be interrupted. The old cycle is not destiny, it is repetition. And repetition may be broken the very night a new feeling is received deeply enough. So I want this to settle into you now, with solemn sweetness. What I take into sleep is not harmless, it is seed, it is conception. It is instruction, and because that is true, I am no longer careless. I am no longer merely exhausted and collapsing into the old story. I am selecting, I am planting, I am becoming deliberate. And this is the hopeful side of it, the side I most want you to carry into what follows. I can conceive a different life tonight. However often you have conceived fear, you can conceive peace. However often you have conceived rejection, you can conceive acceptance. However often you have conceived lack, you can conceive provision. However often you have taken the old story into sleep, you can tonight take the end into sleep instead. The subconscious is fertile still. It has not closed. It has not rejected you. It is waiting, as it always has, to receive what you will now more wisely, more lovingly, more deliberately give it. So let this deepen your reverence for the coming hour. Let it make you quieter. Let it make you more exact. Let it make you understand why I insist upon state, upon feeling, upon the sacredness of the threshold before sleep. For that threshold is not empty. It is the entrance to the womb of creation. And what you bring there in feeling, you do not leave there without consequence. It will be received. It will be conceived. It will begin in silence to bear its kind. Now let me lead you to the night itself, not as most men think of it, but as it truly is when understood. The night is not merely the end of the day. It is not simply the body's collapse after labor. It is not an empty interval between one burden and the next. The night is a temple. You enter it every evening, whether you know it or not, but only a few enter it knowingly. Most stumble across its threshold, carrying the debris of the day, the noise, the unfinished arguments, the fears, the mental clutter, and then they wonder why they wake to a world that resembles the one they carried inward. But tonight, I want you to enter differently. I want you to enter with reverence. There is a threshold between waking and sleep, so subtle that many pass through it without ever observing its power. Yet it is one of the most important borders in all of human experience. You have known it all your life. The body begins to grow heavy. The outer room softens. Sound drifts farther away. Thought loses some of its sharp edges. Images arise more easily. You are not fully asleep, yet not fully bound to waking reason. You hover. That hovering is not emptiness. That hovering is the borderland. That is the state akin to sleep. I have spoken of it often because it is one of the great keys. In that state, the conscious guard grows drowsy. The reasoning faculty, which by day argues, measures, resists, compares, and points endlessly to outward facts, begins to loosen its hold. It does not disappear entirely at once, but it weakens. And because it weakens, what is felt and accepted in that interval passes more deeply into the subconscious. This is why the moments before sleep are sacred. Not because of ceremony, not because of tradition, because of function. Because at that threshold, the gate is open. By day, reason sits like a sentry at the door. It says, be careful, do not believe too much, look at the facts, remember what happened before, be sensible, protect yourself, delay your trust until evidence appears. And in ordinary life, this faculty has its place. But in creation, when one wishes to alter the very state from which life is experienced, reason often becomes the keeper of old prisons. It clings to appearances. It kneels before yesterday. It protects the familiar even when the familiar is suffering. So if all creative work depended upon reasoning acceptance, many would remain forever bound. But blessedly, there is another hour. There is the softening before sleep. As you approach sleep, the sentry tires. The arguments lose force. The old hard edges of mental resistance relax. One does not have to defeat the guard. One simply outlasts his certainty. This is why what is impressed at the edge of sleep carries such potency. The mind is no longer standing upright in the same rigid way. The defenses are lower. The deeper self is more receptive. The subconscious is nearer the surface. And what enters there enters more quietly, more deeply, more completely than what is merely shouted at oneself in daylight strain. So I say to you that sleep is not passive rest alone. Sleep is the creative chamber. It is the inner room where instruction is sealed. Men think of sleep as though it were a blankness, a disappearance, a falling away from life. But spiritually, psychologically, creatively, sleep is one of the most fertile regions of human experience. It is there that the final mood of the day is carried inward. It is there that accepted feeling sinks beneath surface thought and becomes formative. It is there that the subconscious receives its last instruction before it begins its silent work. Instruction is sealed at night. Hear that very carefully. Not merely spoken, but sealed. A thing lightly entertained by day may become deeply planted at night, if felt in that threshold state. That is why the careless person suffers more than he knows. He takes fear to bed as though fear were only a shadow. He takes resentment to bed as though resentment were merely private pain. He takes lack, disappointment, and dread to bed as though the night would wash them harmlessly away. But the night often seals what the day entertained. The chamber receives what the threshold admits. This is why I want reverence in you now. Not fear, but reverence. The same chamber that seals fear can seal peace. The same threshold that admits lack can admit provision. The same borderland that deepens old wounds can deepen a new state entirely. If the night has been misused, it may now be rightly used. If sleep has been approached only as escape, it may now be approached as creation. If you have been entering the temple carelessly, tonight you may enter it knowingly. The imagery matters because it reveals the feeling with which one should approach this hour. Think of the night as a temple. A temple is not entered noisily. One does not storm into it, dragging all the day's debris with no awareness of where one stands. One enters more softly. One becomes quieter near the door. One recognizes that something within this place has power. So too with the final moments before sleep. This is not the hour to keep arguing with the world. This is not the hour to keep building cases against life. This is not the hour to rehearse every grievance and carry every weight to the altar. This is the hour to choose what shall be placed upon the altar. And the threshold itself is like the temple gate. On one side stands the waking world, with its names, its bills, its responsibilities, its visible facts, its endless arguments about what is and is not possible. On the other side is the chamber where feeling becomes instruction, and instruction becomes destiny. You cross this threshold every night. The question is only whether you cross it blindly or knowingly. Most cross it blindly. Tonight I want you to cross it with sacred intelligence. The altar, then, is the final feeling. That is what you lay down there. Not words alone, not hopes alone. Feeling. The thing felt as true is the offering. The mood accepted is the sacrifice. And the creative chamber receives whatever is offered with feeling. If fear is offered, fear is sealed. If relief is offered, relief is sealed. If relief is offered, relief is sealed. If gratitude is offered, gratitude becomes the fragrance of a... The altar is always there. The chamber is always open. The night is always receiving. It only remains for you to become aware of what you are bringing into it. This should change the whole atmosphere of the coming guidance. We are not simply drifting into sleep to forget the day. We are approaching a chamber of impression. We are crossing a threshold where the old hard voice of reason weakens, where the deeper self listens, where instruction may be sealed with a power the daytime mind rarely understands. This is why I have asked you not to rush, not to clutch at a phrase prematurely, not to turn this into another technique of strain. One does not run through a temple. One does not shout at an altar. One does not enter a creative chamber in panic and expect clarity. One grows still enough to receive. Now perhaps you begin to feel the dignity of this hour. The body grows softer for a reason. The senses dim for a reason. The day loosens for a reason. There is mercy built into human consciousness. At the very point when the waking mind can no longer keep its rigid hold, a deeper avenue opens. A man who could not argue himself into peace at noon may receive peace at the threshold of sleep. A woman who could not force herself into faith during the day may enter a quiet assumption at night that the subconscious accepts more readily than all her strained efforts before. This is why the borderland is precious. I want you to think of it also as a chamber, because a chamber is enclosed. It protects what is happening within from outer interruption. So too the inward work at night. Once the door begins to close upon the world of surfaces, another kind of work becomes possible. You are not then required to convince every outer fact. You are not required to solve every visible problem. You are not required to reason your way through 1,000 objections. You need only enter the chamber with the right feeling and allow the deeper law to receive it. The world will call this mystical because it does not understand the simplicity of psychological law. But there is nothing vague about it. The conscious mind weakens. The subconscious grows receptive. The accepted feeling sinks deeper. Instruction is sealed. The night carries it inward. The day later reflects it outward. This is as practical as it is sacred. Indeed, it is sacred because it is practical at the deepest level. Life gives you this threshold every evening. The creative chamber opens every night. How gently marvelous that is. How merciful. How full of possibility. So from this point onward, I do not want you to think of sleep in the old way, not merely as rest, not merely as recovery, though it restores. Think of it also as entry. Think of it as crossing the temple threshold. Think of it as approaching the altar where the feeling of the wish fulfilled may be laid down. Think of it as stepping into the chamber where the subconscious receives its instruction. Think of it as the borderland where you may become more creative by becoming less effortful. And let this awaken reverence in you for what comes next. We are not about to perform a trick. We are not about to chant over the mind until it submits. We are not about to dress longing in pretty language and call it transformation. We are about to enter the sacred mechanics of creation, quietly, deliberately, gently. We are going to use the threshold instead of wasting it. We are going to enter the night knowingly instead of stumbling into it. We are going to place upon the altar something worthy of being sealed. So let the emotional truth of this settle now. The moments before sleep are sacred. Tonight is not just another night. Tonight I enter the creative chamber knowingly. Tonight I cross the threshold with understanding. Tonight I bring to the altar not the old debris of fear, but the seed of another state. And because the chamber receives what is offered with feeling, tonight matters, not in a loud way, in the deepest way. Now that you have begun to feel the sacredness of this hour, I must protect you from a common mistake, one that has kept many earnest people weary without result. The mistake is to imagine that the power lies in the number of words. Men love quantity when they do not yet understand depth. They think if one sentence is good, 100 must be better. If one affirmation is useful, then an hour of affirmations must surely compel the law. And so they speak and speak and speak. They fill notebooks. They repeat long strings of beautiful phrases. They tire the lips. They fatigue the mind. And then they wonder why nothing truly shifts. The answer is simple. Words alone are not the power. Sound alone is not the power. Repetition as mere repetition is not the power. The power is in the impression made upon the subconscious, and impression is born of feeling. If the words do not awaken a state, they remain at the surface. They may sound noble. They may even sound spiritual. But if they do not descend into the deeper self clothed in reality, they are like seeds kept in the hand and never planted. This is why long affirmations often fail when they remain superficial. A man may repeat for an hour, I am prosperous, I am abundant, I am secure, and all the while feel inside the same old pressure, the same old lack, the same old inward shrinking before life. What then has the subconscious received? Not the verbal decoration, but the emotional climate beneath it. It receives the tension, it receives the effort, it receives the hidden confession that the speaker is trying to convince himself because he does not yet feel it true. And so the law answers the deeper state, not the outer noise. I do not say this to rob you of language. Language can be beautiful, and rightly used it can be deeply creative. But language must serve state. It must carry the end. It must act like a small vessel for living feeling. Once you understand that, something relaxes in you at once. You no longer imagine that your salvation lies in saying more and more and more. You begin instead to ask a far more important question. What sentence awakens the state? What brief inward word carries the tone of completion? What can be said gently, naturally, in that borderland before sleep, so that the subconscious receives not speech only, but the reality behind the speech? This is what I mean by decree. Not request, not plea, not negotiation. Decree. There is a world of difference between the two. A request assumes distance. A request assumes that what you seek is elsewhere, that it belongs to another hand, another hour, another condition. A request says, please let this become true. A decree says, it is. A request waits. A decree names. A request bends toward uncertainty. A decree carries the tone of completion. It speaks from the end, not toward it. Now be very clear. I do not mean decree in some violent or theatrical sense. I do not mean shouting at the heavens. I do not mean emotional force. The true decree is often quiet. Indeed, the most powerful decrees are often spoken almost softly, because they come from certainty rather than strain. The king does not have to scream his authority. The one who knows does not need to make a show of knowing. So the inward decree before sleep may be very small in words, and yet immense in creative consequence, because it carries the mood of finality. This is why a short phrase can carry more weight than long repetition. A short phrase slips more easily past the arguing mind. A short phrase may be repeated without strain. A short phrase can rock the feeling gently into place, the way a cradle rocks a child into sleep. The longer the speech, the more likely the conscious mind will begin to inspect it, judge it, compare it, resist it. But a brief living sentence, if it implies the end and if it is joined to feeling, can descend quietly and deeply. Think of it this way. The subconscious does not need your eloquence. It needs your consent. It does not need pages. It needs impression. It does not ask for complexity. It asks, in effect, what is true in feeling now? If your sentence awakens relief, then relief is the instruction. If your sentence awakens safety, then safety is the instruction. If your sentence awakens gratitude, then gratitude is the instruction. The phrase is not the power. The state awakened by it is the power. This should free you greatly. You do not need 1,000 affirmations. You do not need to labor to say all possible right things before sleep overtakes you. You need one living sentence that carries the end, one inward line that implies the matter is settled, one phrase gentle enough to repeat without tension, and deep enough to draw the feeling of completion over you like a garment. That is enough, more than enough, if it is alive. I have seen people exhaust themselves with verbal effort. They thought the law must be deaf because it did not respond to their multiplied affirmations. But the law was never deaf, it was exact. It listened not to their endless words, but to the state from which the words were spoken. If the words came from panic, panic was impressed. If the words came from lack, lack was impressed. If the words came from trying, then trying itself became the state, and trying is not having. This is why one must become very honest, not harsh, only honest. Am I repeating because I am in the state, or am I repeating because I am still outside it and hoping to batter the door down? The decree principle removes that strain. It says, do not batter, enter. Choose a phrase that implies the end. Let it be few words. Let it be present. Let it be final. Let it be emotionally alive. Then, as you move towards sleep, let it sink like a small stone into deep water. Do not throw many stones in agitation. One is enough if it reaches the depth. For some, that phrase may be something as simple as, it is done. For another, I am safe now. For another, everything is taken care of. For another, thank you. Not because these are magic formulas, but because they imply completion. They imply arrival. They imply that the state desired is no longer distant. They do not beg the future. They rest in the end. They are not trying to describe the whole bridge. They are naming the fulfilled condition. And this too is important. The phrase must feel natural enough to enter you. Not necessarily easy at first, but natural enough that it does not provoke immediate inner warfare. If the sentence is too large for your present feeling, you may feel yourself splitting in two, one part speaking and another part denying. Better to choose a phrase that carries the essence of the end in a form your deeper being can begin to accept. Relief is often easier than spectacle. Safety is often easier than grandiosity. Quiet provision is often easier than huge numbers. Peace is often easier than dramatic triumph. Yet within these seemingly smaller tones lies the full seed of fulfillment. Remember, the seed contains the tree. The phrase need not contain every detail. It need only contain the end in essence. If money would make you feel relieved, then a phrase that awakens relief may carry more creative truth than one that names a sum while still leaving you tense. If love would make you feel chosen and safe, then a phrase that awakens chosen safety may be far deeper than one that merely names the outer form, while the heart still fears. The subconscious responds to essence in feeling. So now we build toward that sleep phrase, that key inward sentence. But we do so reverently. We do not seize a line as though it were a charm. We allow it to become the vessel of a state. We prepare the soil first. We understand what the phrase is for. It is not there to impress by sound. It is there to awaken the end. It is there to lull the subconscious into acceptance of a fulfilled condition. It is there to carry you into sleep as the one who already is, not the one who still requests to become. And because of this, fewer words are often more merciful. They leave less room for the mind to quarrel. They do not tire you. They do not burden the threshold with too much speech. They become almost like breathing. They can be repeated slowly, tenderly, sleepily, while the body grows heavier and the senses dim. The phrase begins to lose its quality of being said and instead becomes something inhabited. That is the moment it starts to work more deeply. It ceases to be recitation and becomes state. So let me say it again in another way. A request reaches outward. A decree settles inward. A request asks whether it may be given. A decree assumes it has been given. A request prolongs the distance. A decree closes it. A request still belongs to the one who lacks. A decree belongs to the one who has accepted. That is why before sleep you are not going to beg. You are not going to make speeches to the night. You are going to let one living sentence carry the end for you. Not many words, deep feeling, not 1,000 affirmations, one inward line with life in it, not surface repetition, impression, not request, decree. If this is beginning to settle into you, then something important has already happened. You are no longer looking for some magical arrangement of syllables. You are beginning to understand that the real question is what sentence carries the state? What sentence lets me feel the matter settled? What sentence could I repeat softly as I drift, not to make something happen, but to enter what is already done in consciousness? That is the sentence we are moving toward. And when it is finally given its place, I want you to receive it in the right spirit, not as superstition, but as a small key to a great chamber. For the phrase is not the chamber. The phrase opens the chamber. The chamber is the state, and the state, once entered and felt as true, is what the universe must answer. Now we come to the heart of it. Not the ornament, not the method merely, not the outer form of the teaching, but its living center. Feeling is the secret. If you hear only that sentence tonight and truly understand it, you will have heard enough to begin changing your life. For men have tried to create with words while neglecting feeling. They have tried to impress the subconscious with sound while remaining inwardly unchanged. They have imagined that repetition by itself could do the work that only feeling can do. And so they have grown tired, confused, and often discouraged. Not because the law failed them, but because they did not reach the depth where the law is moved. The subconscious accepts what feels real. It does not accept what merely sounds desirable. It does not respond to the elegance of a phrase. It does not bow before spiritual vocabulary. It receives what carries the tones of reality and feeling. That is why a man may say a beautiful sentence and remain untouched by its promise, while another may whisper only a few words and yet impress the deeper self profoundly. The difference is not in grammar, it is in feeling. One spoke from the lips, the other spoke from the state. This is what so many miss. They imagine that because they have said the right thing, they have done the right thing. But saying is not the same as feeling. Declaring is not the same as inhabiting. Repeating is not the same as accepting. The subconscious is not deceived by speech. It is not impressed by spiritual performance. It is impressed by emotional reality. It listens below the words. It hears the confession beneath the sentence. It receives the mood. It receives the atmosphere. It receives the inner fact. So if a man says, I am wealthy, while inwardly feeling pressure, fear, insufficiency, and dread, what is the subconscious to receive? Not wealth. It receives lack. It receives strain. It receives the emotional certainty of not enough. And because it is faithful, it reproduces that. The sentence may have been about wealth, but the feeling was of poverty. The law answers the feeling. Likewise, if a woman says, I am loved, while the deeper currents of her being still feel rejected, overlooked, unwanted, then what is impressed? Not love. Rejection is impressed. Separation is impressed. And life, obedient to the deeper command, arranges itself to mirror that emotional truth rather than the verbal wish. Do you see how mercifully exact this is? It explains so much. It explains why people can labor with affirmations for months and see little change. It explains why 1 hour of anxious repetition may do less than one quiet moment of genuine relief. It explains why the outer world has seemed to answer what you did not want, because so often what you did not want was what you most deeply felt. Feeling is the real command, not because words are useless, but because words only matter when they awaken the feeling of the wish fulfilled. This is why I say dead repetition has little power. You may repeat a phrase 1,000 times, but if it remains dry, if it remains superficial, if it never enters the body and changes the inner atmosphere, then it has scarcely reached the deeper self. It is like knocking lightly upon a closed door without ever entering the room. But one moment deeply felt, one moment where the desired state becomes inwardly real enough to soften the breath, quiet the mind, alter the posture, and release the old tension, that one moment may outweigh 100 shallow efforts. The law is not counting your repetitions, it is receiving your state. Let me make this even plainer. Suppose you desire wealth. Men often think they must feel excitement about riches, but excitement is not the deepest sign. Excitement often still carries waiting. Excitement can still carry distance, as though the thing were approaching but not yet present. The true feeling of wealth, in many cases, is relief. It is ease. It is the quiet exhale of a man who no longer feels pressed by life. It is the softening of one who feels provided for. It is the ending of inner bracing. If you can enter that relief, you may be nearer the state of wealth than when you shout grand phrases while still feeling poor. The same is true of love. Many imagine love in dramatic terms, but the feeling that impresses most deeply is often safety, warmth, being at ease in another's presence, the absence of inner defense, the calm certainty of being chosen, not the frantic excitement of chasing evidence. To say, I am loved, while inwardly scanning for rejection, is to plant rejection, but to enter the stillness, warmth, and settled belonging of one who already is loved. That is to impress the subconscious with love as a present fact. And freedom too must be felt, not merely admired. A man may say, I am free, while every nerve in him still feels trapped, burdened, watched, cornered by life. If so, bondage is still the state. But if he can enter, even for a few quiet moments, the bodily feeling of space, the loosening of pressure, the inward dignity of one who is no longer under the hand of necessity, then he has begun to impress freedom. The law always answers what is emotionally occupied. This is why relief, safety, gratitude, possession, and certainty are such powerful creative feelings. They imply the end without argument. They do not strain toward fulfillment, they rest in it. Relief means the burden has already lifted. Safety means the danger has already passed. Gratitude means the gift has already been received. Possession means the thing is already mine. Certainty means the matter is already settled. These are not empty emotions. They are psychological confirmations of an accepted state. When they are genuinely entered, even softly, the subconscious receives them as facts. And because feeling is the secret, the whole matter of prayer changes. Prayer is no longer begging a distant power to take pity. Prayer becomes the act of entering the feeling of the wish fulfilled. It becomes emotional reality. It becomes inward possession. The words may still be present, yes, but the words are no longer trying to persuade the heavens. They are helping you descend into a state. Once there, the words may become fewer and fewer, until only the feeling remains. And when the feeling remains, the command has been given. I want you to consider how many people have prayed from longing, instead of from having. They have imagined from the standpoint of I want. They have affirmed from the standpoint of I need. They have repeated words of abundance while feeling lack, words of love while feeling emptiness, words of healing while feeling fear. Then they judged the law by the visible result and said, it did not work. But what was planted? Not the desired thing. The desired thing was spoken of, yes, but the opposite was felt. The subconscious receives the felt seed, not the spoken decoration. This is why emotional honesty matters so deeply. Not so that you remain bound to old feeling, but so that you stop imagining that surface words can override a deeper confession. If you feel lack, do not simply pile words of wealth on top of it and call that creation. Enter instead the feeling that wealth would give. If you feel unloved, do not merely recite love while staying inwardly wounded. Enter the warmth, the peace, the calm belonging that would accompany being loved. If you feel trapped, do not try to force the idea of freedom while inwardly bracing. Enter the spaciousness, the relief, the subtle dignity that freedom itself would feel like. This is how the state is impressed, through emotional reality. And because it is emotional reality, one deeply felt moment matters immensely. Men often underestimate the power of a single true moment. They think because it was brief, it must have been weak. Not so. A seed is small. A spark is brief. A conception happens in a moment. The issue is not duration alone. The issue is whether it was alive. One moment of actual acceptance at the threshold of sleep. One moment where you truly feel, it is done. I am safe. I am provided for. I am loved. I am free. May carry more creative consequence than endless repetition done in inner conflict. Now do not misunderstand me. Repetition has its place, but repetition is useful because it deepens feeling, not because the law is deaf and must be shouted at. Repetition is a cradle for the mood. It is a way of rocking yourself into the state. If the repetition remains dry, it remains shallow. If it becomes warm with reality, then it is useful. So the question is never merely, how many times did I say it? The question is, did I feel it? Did it become true in me, even for a little while? Did the body confess the state? Did the mind begin to quiet, as though the matter were settled? When the feeling is real, certain signs appear. The breath changes, the shoulders may drop, the jaw may soften, the mind stops chasing quite so much. There is often a sense of inward release, like a knot loosening. Sometimes gratitude rises naturally. Sometimes a sigh comes. Sometimes there is a deep stillness. These are not things to force, but they often accompany a state becoming real. The body is honest. It tells you when a burden has been laid down, even imaginally. It tells you when the end has been accepted more deeply than words alone can reach. This is why I have always insisted that feeling is the secret, not because it sounds poetic, but because it is exact. Feeling is what gives life to the imaginal act. Feeling is the bridge between the chosen idea and the receptive subconscious. Feeling is what makes a scene fertile. Feeling is what turns a phrase into a decree. Feeling is what changes prayer from request into possession. Feeling is the real command. So now perhaps you begin to hear your own inner work differently. You are not asked merely to repeat, you are asked to enter. You are not asked merely to say the sentence, you are asked to let the sentence awaken a state. You are not asked merely to think of the end, you are asked to feel from the end. And once you begin to do that, Once even a little emotional reality enters your practice, everything changes. The law is no longer being approached superficially. It is being approached at the point where it actually creates. Let this settle into you very quietly now. What matters is not repetition alone, but whether it feels true. The subconscious accepts feeling as fact. The state is impressed through emotional reality. One deeply felt moment may outweigh many shallow repetitions. Relief creates, safety creates, gratitude creates, possession creates, certainty creates. The law answers what is felt, and therefore before sleep, when the mind is softer and the body more yielding, do not try to perform spirituality. Do not try to impress yourself with the sound of your own affirmations. Let one phrase, one scene, one inward act carry you into a genuine feeling of fulfillment. Let that feeling be the command. Let that feeling be the offering, laid upon the altar. Let that feeling be the final mood. The subconscious receives, for feeling is the secret. And once you know that, you stop trying to create through noise. You begin creating through reality. Now, because I do not want this to remain for you a beautiful idea only, I must give you something practical, something gentle, something almost childlike in its simplicity, and yet enormously important. I speak of small tests. Many who first hear of this law want at once to apply it to the heaviest matter in their life. They want to seize the largest burden, the deepest wound, the greatest sum of money, the most painful separation, and prove the whole mystery in a single dramatic stroke. I understand that impulse. Pain always wants immediate confirmation, but often the wiser beginning is smaller. Small tests matter because they remove argument. They do not carry the same weight of fear, the same history of disappointment, the same emotional resistance. When the thing desired feels small to the surface mind, the mind does not rise up so violently to oppose it. It does not say, "This is impossible." It does not immediately gather all its proofs against you. And because resistance is lighter, the imaginal act enters more easily. The law itself makes no distinction between a small thing and a great thing. The distinction exists only in the mind of man. To consciousness, a ladder and a palace are both states. A letter and a fortune are both states. A meeting and a marriage are both states. The law responds to acceptance, not to size. That is why I have often encouraged what some would call little experiments. Not because the law is small, but because your faith may still be tender. And faith, when it first awakens, is helped by memory. I do not mean blind belief. I mean remembered proof. Once you have tested the law in a simple matter and seen the outer world answer, something in you changes. You no longer speak only from theory. You begin to say inwardly, "I have seen this happen. I know now that imagination is not idle. I know now that the world does echo the state I accept, and that knowing is worth more than 100 borrowed convictions." Years ago, I gave to many the simple exercise of imagining a ladder, not because ladders are spiritual, not because there is anything sacred about wood or rungs, but because a ladder is plain, ordinary, and emotionally neutral. I told them, as they lay upon their bed at night and approached the state akin to sleep, not to think of a ladder from a distance, but to feel themselves climbing one, to put the hands upon the rungs in imagination, to feel the pressure of the foot rising to the next step, to sense the body moving upward, not to watch it as though it belonged to another, but to enter it, to be the one climbing. And during the day I told them the opposite with the lips if they wished. I will not climb a ladder. This was not contradiction for its own sake. It was to show them that what is deeply felt in imagination outweighs the surface protest of the waking mind. Again and again, those who did this with simplicity found themselves climbing a ladder in the most ordinary and unexpected ways. Not because they set out the next day determined to force the result, not because they hunted for ladders in the street. Quite the contrary. Life arranged the incident. A neighbor needed help. A task appeared. A storeroom required reaching. A simple event unfolded. And there they were, standing on a ladder, often laughing when they realized what had happened. The law had answered. The imaginal act had become fact. And once it became fact in something so simple, doubt began to lose its sharpness. That is why small tests are precious. They educate the soul. They soften the argumentative mind. They show you that the world is not as fixed as the senses pretend. They teach you that the echo follows the imaginal act. And because the thing tested is small, you are less likely to interfere. You are less likely to keep checking, less likely to clutch, less likely to fear. You imagine, you feel, you let go, and then you observe. And in that observation, the law often reveals itself with astonishing clarity. Perhaps for you it need not be a ladder. Perhaps it may be a letter from someone you have not heard from in some time. Perhaps it may be seeing a particular flower, a familiar object, hearing a certain phrase, receiving a kind word, meeting someone unexpectedly, handling some small sum of money, or hearing your own name spoken in a certain setting. The thing itself does not matter greatly. What matters is that it be simple enough that you do not go to war with yourself over it. Let it be light. Let it be natural. Let it feel like a gentle experiment in the science of consciousness. And then do what I have told you. At night, in the drowsy borderland, do not merely wish for it. Enter the end. If it is a letter, feel the paper in your hands. If it is a flower, see it and feel your recognition of it. If it is hearing a phrase, let the phrase sound inwardly with the tones of reality. If it is a coin or a note of money, feel it, not as a dream watched from afar, but as a fact touched now. Keep the scene short. Let it imply completion. Let it be one small act with the feeling of this has happened. Then let it go. That is crucial. You are not to spend the next day hunting it anxiously. You are not to become a detective of your own manifestation. You are to observe life with quieter eyes. Watch for the echo. Watch how naturally the thing appears. Watch how often it comes through channels you would not have planned. Watch how the very ordinariness of its arrival is what makes it so persuasive. For the law rarely needs drama to prove itself. It needs only response. When you begin to observe these small responses, faith changes its nature. It ceases to be merely borrowed language. It ceases to be noble effort. It becomes memory. You say, I remember imagining that. I remember entering that feeling. I remember the thing appearing. And that memory becomes a foundation. Then when you turn to larger matters, you do not begin from superstition or desperate hope. You begin from evidence born of your own inner practice. You begin from the memory that the law answered when tested simply. This is why I say the law does not recognize big and small. Men do. To the mind, money may seem greater than a ladder, love greater than a flower, freedom greater than a letter. But the law is concerned only with state. Can you accept it? Can you feel it? Can you enter it? Can you sleep in it? That is the whole matter. The distinction of magnitude belongs to fear and habit, not to the creative power itself. And so if your heart is still uncertain, do not despise the little experiment. Do not say, this is too small to matter. Small things matter because they teach you to trust the mechanism. They show you the principle at work. They build familiarity with the way imagination passes into fact. They remove the old superstition that only great emotion or great need can move the world. The world moves according to law, and law can be seen in the small as surely as in the great. I would rather you prove this to yourself gently and truly than pretend certainty in some larger matter while inwardly divided. Let the small manifestation become your teacher. Let it become your witness. Let it become your remembered proof that the world is not deaf to state. Once you have that, you will approach your greater desires with a different spirit, less strain, less pleading, less worship of circumstances, more quiet authority, more simplicity, more trust in the imaginal act. So tonight, or in the nights to come, choose something simple and test it, not recklessly, not mechanically, tenderly. Enter the feeling of the accomplished little thing, and then watch. Let life answer. Let the ordinary become your evidence. Let the echo teach you. And as it does, say to yourself, not with pride, but with dawning certainty, I can prove this to myself. Faith need not remain blind. It may become memory. That is how confidence grows, not by shouting over doubt, but by seeing the law work in one's own experience. And once you have seen it, even in a little thing, the whole inner posture begins to change. You no longer wonder in quite the same way whether imagination creates reality. You begin to remember that it does. And remembrance is much stronger than borrowed belief. Now I must speak plainly about the promise that brought you here, because words such as these can be misunderstood if they are heard only by the surface mind. You have heard the phrase, force the universe to respond, and the ordinary mind imagines struggle. It imagines pressure. It imagines some kind of emotional violence, as though the heavens must be bullied, as though life were reluctant and must be dragged into obedience by intensity. But that is not what I mean, and it is not what the law means. The universe is not forced by strain. It is forced by inevitability. It is compelled by accepted state. That is a very different thing. If I stand before a mirror and smile, I do not strain against it to make it reflect the smile. I do not threaten it. I do not plead with it. I do not repeat 1,000 times. Reflect me, reflect me, reflect me. I change the face, and the mirror has no choice. The reflection is forced, yes, but not by violence. It is forced by law. The mirror is compelled by the condition presented to it. In exactly the same way, the universe is compelled by the state you occupy. When the state is truly accepted, the response becomes inevitable. So now hear the word force in the right sense. Not tension, not effort, not desperation. Force in the sense of certainty. Force in the sense of consequence. Force in the sense that once the cause is set in consciousness, the effect must follow. That is the only forcing worthy of the name. It is not the forcing of a frantic man pushing against the world. It is the forcing of law, the inevitability of correspondence, the certainty that when the inner thing is done, the outer thing must answer. This is why I have spoken to you so much about state, about feeling, about the subconscious, about the night, about the borderland before sleep. Because if you misunderstand the title promise, you will go at once into the old era. You will think, very well, I must intensify, I must grip harder, I must concentrate more fiercely, I must push with stronger emotion. But that is the old world again. That is the worship of effort. That is the misunderstanding that has exhausted so many sincere souls. No, the universe is not moved by muscular emotion. It is moved by accepted assumption. The command is not strain. The command is inner completion. When I say the universe is forced to respond, I mean that once you enter the causal state and rest there, the universe has no alternative but response. It may take its own sequence of incidents. It may choose channels you did not foresee. It may unfold naturally, quietly, almost invisibly at first. But response there must be. Why? Because the outer world is not creative. It is reflective. It is secondary. It is compelled by what is first. And what is first is consciousness. This should give you great power and also great peace, for it means you are not being asked to conquer life outwardly. You are not being asked to dominate circumstance by force of personality. You are not being asked to perform some heroic feat of will. You are being asked to do something subtler and much greater, to enter the state so completely that the law has already been fulfilled in consciousness. When that happens, the universe is under compulsion, not emotional compulsion, lawful compulsion. Think of gravity. No man begs gravity to work. No man chants over it. No man wonders each morning whether it is still faithful. It acts because it is law. If a thing is released, gravity responds. In the same way, if a state is accepted, the universe responds. The law may be unseen, but it is no less exact. The bridge of incidents may unfold in time, but the compulsion begins instantly. The accepted state is the command. Now let us say it even more clearly. You do not force the universe by effort, you force it by identification. You do not force it by shouting affirmations while inwardly unconvinced. You force it by inwardly becoming the one who already has. You do not force it by demanding signs. You force it by entering the end so quietly and so fully that signs become almost irrelevant. You do not force it by emotional display. You force it by naturalness, by the calm authority of a state already occupied. That is why one deeply accepted assumption is stronger than 100 panicked repetitions. One inward moment of true relief is stronger than hours of verbal strain. One quiet act of sleeping in the fulfilled state may have more force than days of anxious effort, because force in the lawful sense belongs to what is real in consciousness, not to what is noisy in expression. The universe answers reality of state. The more inwardly real the state, the more irresistible the command. This is what I want you to feel now. Not merely understand, but feel. Your assumption is not a weak little thought floating in a private mind. Your assumption, once accepted, is a causal act. It is a decree at the level from which life takes shape. It does not need to be dramatic to be powerful. It does not need witnesses. It does not need applause. It needs only acceptance. Once accepted, it enters law. And once it enters law, the universe must respond. Men have often imagined the universe as something outside themselves that must be persuaded, charmed, emotionally stirred, or spiritually impressed. But the universe is not a person standing apart from you deciding whether to cooperate. It is the outer body of the states entertained within consciousness. Therefore, when the state changes, the universe is already under a new instruction. It is already moving, even if the senses have not yet caught the movement. This is what makes assumption so powerful. It is not wishful thinking. It is causal occupation. So when you hear the phrase, force the universe to respond, hear it now in Neville's sense, not in the world's sense. Hear it as inevitability. Hear it as reflection compelled by state. Hear it as the mirror unable to resist the face. Hear it as the shadow unable to oppose the substance. Hear it as the world, which seems so solid when viewed from fear, becoming obedient when viewed from law. And this is why the title is not false when rightly understood. The universe is forced to respond when the state is truly accepted, not because you fought hard enough, but because you finally stopped fighting and entered the cause, not because you became intense, but because you became inwardly complete, not because you pressured life, but because you occupied the end so naturally that life had to mirror it. This is the shift I want in you, before we go deeper. I do not want you listening as though you are about to learn another technique of effort. I want you listening as one who is beginning to realize that assumption itself is command, feeling itself is command, entering the state itself is command. Your assumption is the command. The universe is not being asked politely from a distance. It is being instructed by the very consciousness from which its visible arrangement proceeds. So let this settle into your body now as power without strain. The universe is forced to respond when the state is truly accepted. My assumption is the command. My inner completion is the cause. I do not need to force by effort. I need only enter the state that leaves the universe no alternative but response. That is lawful force. That is creative authority. And that is what we are moving toward now. Now let everything begin to quiet a little more. There is nothing you must prove in this hour. Nothing you must make happen by force of mind. Nothing you must hold together for the world. You have listened long enough with the waking intelligence. Now I want you to begin listening with something deeper, something softer, something that does not argue. Let the body know first that the labor of the day is over. Let it feel that it is no longer required to stand guard in the old way. If you are lying down, allow yourself to be fully where you are. Let the bed take your weight without apology. There is no need to hold any part of yourself above it as though you must remain prepared. If you are seated, let the chair or whatever supports you do its work. You need not support yourself by tension. You need not keep the old firmness in the shoulders or the chest. This is not the hour for effort. This is the hour for yielding. Let the face soften first. Men carry more strain in the face than they know. The world teaches them to hold expression, to keep some inward watchfulness, some subtle guard at the brow, the mouth, the eyes. But now the face may become quiet. Let the skin around the eyes grow softer. Let the forehead release the fine invisible lines of thought. Let the space between the brows become smooth. Let the eyes themselves, whether closed or growing drowsy, feel less responsible for the world. Now let the jaw loosen. So often the jaw holds what the heart has not yet surrendered. The will to endure, the old effort to stay braced, the habit of inner resistance. All of this can gather there without your noticing. So let the jaw unclench. Let the teeth rest apart if they wish. Let the tongue lie easy in the mouth. No word needs defending now. No argument needs finishing. No answer must be prepared for tomorrow. Let the mouth become still. Then let the neck and the throat soften. That throat has carried many unsaid things, many forced swallowings, many withheld fears, many private sentences no one else heard. But tonight the throat need not hold any burden. Let it be open, quiet, unguarded. Let the neck release the old vigilance of holding the head up before life. You are held now. Let yourself be held. Bring gentleness to the shoulders. The shoulders have perhaps carried far more than belongs to them. They have lifted against anxiety. They have braced under imagined futures. They have tightened beneath responsibility and memory. But you need not carry tomorrow on the shoulders tonight. Let them fall a little lower, and then lower still. Not dramatically, gently, as a branch lowers under evening dew, as though some invisible hand had removed a weight you had grown so accustomed to carrying that you forgot it was there. Let the chest be softer now, not collapsed, not forced open, simply less defended. Let the ribs move without being instructed. Let the breath come and go on its own terms. Do not attempt to breathe deeply. That too can become another effort. Simply notice that breathing is already happening. It has been happening without your command all your life. The wisdom that breathes you needs no supervision. So let the breath teach you now. It comes, it goes, it comes again, quietly, faithfully, without demand. And perhaps as you notice the breath, you can allow each exhale to loosen something, not by naming it too sharply, not by making a task of release, Just let each outward breath carry away a little of the day's unnecessary tension. The first breath may soften the chest, the next may quiet the belly, the next may release some hidden holding in the hands. You do not have to measure the progress. You only have to stop interfering with softness as it arrives. Let the hands rest now as though they are no longer required to grasp the world. How much of human life is hidden in the fingers, in the quiet need to hold, to control, to tighten around what has not yet happened? But tonight the hands may empty themselves of that old habit. Let them be still. Let the arms grow heavy. Let them belong to rest. Now let the belly loosen too. So many men and women go through life with the center of the body braced against an unseen blow. The belly tightens around fear, around uncertainty, around the need to be ready. But this hour asks nothing of such readiness. Let the belly soften. Let the middle of you receive the message that there is no emergency here, no immediate danger, no demand for inner armor. Let the center of the body become warm and quiet. Then let the legs grow heavier. Let the thighs rest. Let the knees release their holding. Let the calves sink. Let the feet become still. The body knows how to enter stillness if you stop commanding it to remain prepared. It has done this every night of your life. The body understands surrender better than the mind does. So trust the body now. It knows the road towards sleep. It knows how to descend when no one stands in the doorway, ordering it to remain awake with worry. And now let the mind itself be approached more gently. You are not here to silence it by force. You are not here to conquer thought. Such struggle only keeps the mind bright and alert. Instead, I want you to grow less interested in thought. Let thought pass like voices heard from another room. They may continue for a while. That is of no consequence. You need not follow every one. You need not answer them. You need not solve them. Let them drift at the edge of you while you remain closer to breath, closer to weight, closer to softness. If a thought comes about tomorrow, let it come and go. If a memory presents itself, let it rise and fade. If an old fear tries to ask for attention, let it speak into a room that is already emptying itself of argument. You are not required to attend every visitor. You are not obligated to host every inner voice. This is not negligence, it is wisdom. For the state akin to sleep is entered not by defeating thought, but by withdrawing nourishment from it. Thought grows faint when interest leaves it. So now become less analytical, not by command, but by permission. You do not need to understand every part of what is happening. You do not need to monitor your progress. You do not need to ask whether you are doing it right. That question belongs to the daylight mind that still wishes to supervise mystery. But this is not a mechanical act. This is a soft descent into receptivity. The less you inspect it, the more naturally it opens. Let the room around you begin to feel farther away. You need not force this either. Simply notice that the sounds of the world matter less now. The walls matter less. The objects matter less. The day behind you is losing its immediacy. The world does not disappear, but its authority lessens. And as its authority lessens, the inward world begins to feel more available. This is the beginning of the threshold, not sleep yet, but the softening before it, not dream, but the borderland where dream becomes possible. This is the state akin to sleep. This is the lovely in-between. Here the body is growing heavy, but awareness remains. Here thought has not vanished, but it no longer rules with the same sharpness. Here imagination is nearer. Here feeling is more impressionable. Here the old guard of reason has begun to tire. You do not need to rush toward this state. Rushing belongs to effort. Let it come toward you. Notice now that as the body softens, the imagination becomes more natural. You do not have to create anything yet. I do not ask you for a scene yet. I ask only that you become soft enough to receive one, soft enough to feel one, soft enough to allow the deeper mind to accept what the waking mind so often resists. You are not being asked to perform. You are being asked to enter. Let yourself grow drowsier in feeling, even if sleep itself has not yet arrived. Drowsiness is not weakness, it is openness. It is one of the great mercies built into human consciousness. When you are drowsy, you are not so tightly defended against another possibility. The old story loses some of its stiffness. The future feels less combative. The body becomes willing to yield, and in that yielding the state may be entered. So do not demand some perfect degree of sleepiness. You need not ask, am I deep enough yet? You need not wait for some dramatic sign. If the body is softer, if the breath is quieter, if thought is less sharp, if the world feels a little farther away, then you are already approaching the threshold. You are soft enough now to begin. You are near enough now to enter. Let that be a comfort. You do not need to manufacture a special condition beyond this one. You do not need to impress yourself. The whole old life was too much about impressing, proving, earning, achieving. The state akin to sleep is entered by another law entirely. It is entered by letting go of unnecessary control, by becoming inwardly simple, by allowing the body to say yes to rest before the mind has fully learned to trust it. And now I want you to feel something even quieter. Beneath all the softening, beneath the heavy limbs, beneath the slower breath, beneath the lessening interest in thought, there remains the simple awareness that you are not the story of you, not the problem of you, not the hopes and fears attached to your name, just the simple fact of being. I am. You need not speak it yet, if you do not wish. Let it simply be there. The root, the quiet presence beneath all states. Rest near that now. The more you rest near it, the less the old outer noise can command you. The more you rest near it, the more the threshold becomes natural. You are no longer trying to get somewhere. You are settling. You are no longer trying to force feeling. You are making room for it. You are no longer approaching imagination as labor. You are approaching it as entry. So let the body be heavy. Let the face be soft. Let the jaw be easy. Let the shoulders fall. Let the chest quiet. Let the hands rest. Let the breath move on its own. Let the mind become less interested in its own commentary. Let the room drift farther away. Let the threshold draw near. Let the borderland receive you. And if a small question still remains in you, let it be answered now with gentleness. Yes, you are soft enough now. Yes, you can enter the state. Yes, the old tightness has loosened enough. Yes, the chamber is opening. Yes, you are near the borderland. You need do nothing impressive. You need only remain here a little longer, growing quieter, heavier, simpler, until the imaginal world begins to feel less like invention and more like a place already waiting for you. Now that the body is quieter and the mind less eager to inspect, I want to lead you into something very simple. Do not make it grand. Do not ask it to dazzle you, as the subconscious is impressed more deeply by what feels ordinary and true than by what feels theatrical. So tonight, we do not reach for spectacle. We enter provision through relief. I want you to imagine that something has already arrived, not that it is coming, not that you are waiting for it, not that you are hoping some channel will open. It has arrived. The burden is lifted. The matter is settled. Let that be the whole spirit of what follows. It has arrived. The burden is lifted. The matter is settled. Let that be the whole spirit. The matter is settled. Now imagine very gently that in your hands there is an envelope. Do not strain to see it. Let it come as softly as memory comes. It is already in your possession. You are not watching someone hand it to you. You are not standing at a distance. It is already in your hands. Feel that first. Feel the weight of it. The paper is thick enough to be noticed. It is not flimsy. It has substance. It rests against your fingers with quiet certainty. Feel the texture of it now. Perhaps it is smooth, almost firm at the edges. Perhaps there is a slight grain beneath your thumb. Perhaps the paper is cool at first touch. Do not work too hard to make it vivid. One real touch is enough. Let your fingers know that it is there. You are holding the thing that changes the atmosphere within you. You do not yet need to read anything. First, only feel that it is already yours. Now let your thumb move along the edge of the envelope. Feel the seam. Feel the place where it opens. There is no hurry here. The one who has received does not snatch. The one who has received is not frantic. There is already relief in the body even before the envelope is opened, because something in you knows. It is here. It has arrived. This is for me. Let those words come inwardly, if they feel natural. This is for me, not as greed, not as grasping, simply as recognition. The universe has answered, and the answer is in your hands. This is for me. Now slowly open the envelope. Feel the slight resistance as your finger slips beneath the flap. Hear the small sound of paper giving way. Let it be intimate. Let it be real. The sound is soft, almost private, the sort of sound one hears only when very near. You open it calmly, because the burden has already begun to lift. Inside is what settles the matter. It may be a check. It may be money. It may be a document that tells you the thing is approved, paid, cleared, provided. The outer form matters less than the implication is everything. The matter is settled. Provision has come. Let your hand draw it out now and hold it. If it is a check, feel the firmness of it, the stiffer paper beneath your fingers. If it is money, feel the texture, the dryness of the notes, the slight flexibility of them. If it is a letter of settlement or approval, feel the weight of the paper and know what it means before you even read the line. The mind need not force every detail. Let the feeling carry the truth. It has arrived. The burden is lifted. The matter is settled. Now allow your eyes, in imagination, to fall upon one simple line. Do not ask for too much. One line is enough. It may say paid in full. It may say approved. It may say settled. It may say credited. It may say enclosed. The exact phrase is not important. What matters is that the body recognizes its meaning at once. This changes everything. The pressure is over. The need to brace is over. The burden is lifted. Let the first true feeling be relief, not excitement. Relief. Relief is much nearer to wealth than greed ever is. Relief is the feeling of the end. Relief is the body confessing that the strain may stop. So now let yourself breathe as one whose matter is settled. Notice how the chest changes when the burden is no longer there. Notice how the shoulders drop a little more. Notice how the belly softens. Notice how the jaw releases another little measure of holding. This is the real sign. Provision is becoming real in feeling. Now I want you to hear your own voice very softly, not outwardly, but inwardly. You look at what has arrived and you say, in the simplest, most natural tone, it is done. Or if it feels more natural, it's taken care of. Choose one, only one. Do not hurry it. Let the phrase rise from relief, not from effort. It is done, or it's taken care of. Choose one, only one. Do not hurry it. Let the phrase rise. Say it inwardly. Now the way a person says something when the problem no longer exists. No drama, no performance, just the low, quiet recognition of a settled matter. Again, very softly. It is done, or it's taken care of. Now return to the envelope. Hold it again. Feel its weight. Open it again. Draw out the proof again. Read the simple implication again. Let the relief come again. This is your loop. Short, gentle, repeatable. You hold the envelope. You see the proof. The burden lifts. You say it is done, or it's taken care of. Then you rest in relief. Do it again now. More slowly. The envelope is in your hands. You feel its weight. You open it. You draw out what has arrived. You know the matter is settled. The chest softens. The breath deepens. You say inwardly, it is done. Again, it is in your hands. It has arrived. You open it. You see the sign of provision. The burden lifts. The body yields. They say, it's taken care of. This is enough. More than enough. The subconscious does not need a long film. It needs a short living act. So let this little scene become more and more natural. You are not trying to improve it. You are letting it sink. You are letting the body learn what provision feels like. You are letting relief become familiar. Now perhaps very gently you hear a voice near you. One voice, not a crowd, not applause. Just one warm, ordinary voice saying something simple like, it came through, or you're all right now, or it's settled. Let the voice be quiet and natural. Hear it as though it belongs to the life you already live. That voice changes nothing by itself. It only confirms what has already arrived. Provision is already present. The burden is already lifted. And now your own reply, softly and naturally. Thank you, or it is done, or it's taken care of. Choose the one that most carries completion for you. Let it be the decree tied to this scene. Let it become the little inward bell you touch each time you enter the feeling. The deeper truth here is not the object in your hand. The deeper truth is the state in your body. The state is relief. The state is provision. The state is no longer bracing. That is what the subconscious receives. So if the details of the envelope blur a little, do not be troubled. Keep the feeling. And the lack only serve to awaken the state. The state is the power. Now let the relief spread just a little wider. The old pressure about tomorrow no longer sits in the same place. The old fear around money has for this moment lost its teeth. The matter has been answered. You are not wondering how. You are not calculating. You are not bargaining. You have received. That is enough. Again now, very gently, loop the scene. The envelope is in your hands. You feel it. You open it. Provision has arrived. The matter is settled. Relief fills the chest. You say, it is done. Again. The envelope rests in your fingers. You open it calmly. You see what settles the matter. The shoulders drop. The jaw softens. You breathe more easily. You say, it's taken care of. Do not be afraid of simplicity. Simplicity is often the doorway through which the deepest impression enters. The man who truly receives does not need 1,000 descriptions of his fortune. He needs the inward ending of pressure. He needs the feeling that now there is enough, that now the need to fear has ended, that now the matter is concluded. Let the scene shorten even more if it wishes. Perhaps now it becomes only this, the feeling of the envelope in your hand and the phrase, "It is done." Perhaps it becomes the opening of the envelope and the breath of relief. Perhaps it becomes the words "paid in full" and the dropping of the shoulders. However it wants to simplify, let it simplify. The shorter and more natural it becomes, the easier it is to carry into sleep. Now quietly, let gratitude arise, if it comes, not forced gratitude, not performed gratitude. The gratitude that comes when one is no longer threatened by tomorrow in the same way. The gratitude of one who has received a simple inward thank you. No more than that, thank you. It is done. Thank you. It's taken care of. Stay near that now. Settlement. No greed, no strain, no shouting for wealth, only the fulfilled feeling of enough, of being answered, of being supported, of the burden lifted. And if the old mind tries to ask, but is it really? Do not answer with argument. Answer with the scene, the envelope, the opening, the proof, the relief, the decree. That is enough. Again, very softly, it is done. Again, it's taken care of. Let the body believe it for a little while. Let the chest believe it. Let the deeper self receive it without debate. You are not trying to convince the world. You are entering the state that the world must later reflect. That is why this matters. That is why this scene is enough, because the desire is already fulfilled in feeling. Now rest in that fulfillment for a few more moments. The envelope in your hands, the matter settled, the burden lifted, the chest relieved, the phrase quiet within you. It is done. It's taken care of. Outer arrived, the burden is lifted, the matter is settled, and remain there until provision begins to feel less like a hope and more like a memory that has already entered the body. Now let us move into another chamber of the fulfilled life, one no less real, no less lawful, no less subject to feeling than money or provision. For many who listen are not burdened first by want of money, but by the ache of not feeling chosen, not feeling securely loved, not feeling at rest in the heart. And because this too is a state, it too may be entered tonight. I do not want drama here. Leave drama to the old self. The old self has lived too long in guessing, in scanning, in wondering, in measuring tones of voice, delays, absences, silences, little signs, half promises, and all the restless movements of fear. We are not entering that world now. We are entering calm union. We are entering the deep bodily knowledge of being wanted without needing to ask, without needing to chase, without needing to prove your worth to another soul. Love, when entered as a state, is quieter than longing imagines. It is steadier. It is safer. It is more like home than like excitement. So now let the body remain soft as it is, and allow a new imaginal feeling to form. Again, do not make a long story. We want one short act, one small scene, something simple enough to repeat, intimate enough to carry the full implication. You are loved, you are chosen, you are safe, the bond is secure. Let that be the atmosphere. Imagine now that you are resting in a quiet room. It may be evening, it may be early morning. The light is soft, not bright. There is nothing public in this scene, nothing dramatic, nothing to impress the world. This is private, this is personal. This is the kind of moment that carries truth, because it is ordinary. You are not performing love, you are inside it. Now imagine that your hand is being held, just that, a hand holding yours. Do not rush ahead. Let the contact itself become real. Feel the warmth of another hand around yours. Feel the steady pressure, not tight, not uncertain, just present. The touch is calm. It is not a grasp born of fear. It is the touch of someone who is already there. Someone who does not need to prove affection, because affection is already true. Let your hand feel received. Notice how much this changes the body. Even in imagination, the hand that is held no longer feels alone in the same way. The chest begins to soften. The shoulders lose some of their vigilance. The heart, which has perhaps stood watch too long, begins to understand another possibility. I am not reaching now, I am being met. Now feel the hand more clearly, the warmth, the quiet weight, the slight movement of the fingers, the naturalness of it. Your hand is not being seized dramatically, it is being held in peace, held because it belongs there, held because love is present, held because you are chosen. Let those words rise softly if they feel natural. I am chosen. not as a cry, not as a demand, just as recognition. I am chosen. Now, with the hand still holding yours, hear a voice very near you. One voice, not a speech, not an apology, not an elaborate confession, only one line, spoken simply, in a tone that leaves no fear behind it. Perhaps the voice says, I'm here. Perhaps it says, you are mine. Perhaps it says, you are safe with me. Perhaps it says, I choose you. Use whichever feels most natural, most quiet, most true to the state of secure love. We are not looking for, or I choose you, or you are safe with me. Let the words come gently, as though they belong to a life already lived. The voice is not uncertain. It is not persuading. It is not trying to repair through drama. It is simply true. Let the body hear that truth. Let the chest hear it. Let the belly hear it. Let the old inner bracing begin to soften. Now your own response, softly, inwardly, naturally. Perhaps only the quiet, knowing that there is nothing to chase. Let it be very little. Love in its fulfilled state does not need many words. It needs rest. It needs safety. It needs the end of inner scanning. So feel that now. The old habit of scanning the horizon of another person for proof begins to stop. The old habit of reading absence into every silence begins to stop. The old habit of wondering why. Because in this state, none of that is required. Love is already here. You are already chosen. The hand is already holding yours. Now repeat the scene. Gently, your hand is being held. You feel the warmth. You feel the calm pressure. The voice says, I choose you, or I'm here. Your body softens. You are safe. Again, your hand rests in another hand. There is no, the heart stops standing guard. You are chosen. This is your loop, small enough to carry into sleep, deep enough to imply the whole fulfilled state. One hand, one voice, one felt certainty. No long story. No need to explain how love was restored, how union came, how someone changed, how the outer world rearranged itself. Leave that to the bridge. Our concern is the state. The state. Now, if it helps, let the hand holding yours gently lift it, and you feel a thumb pass softly across your fingers. A small, reassuring movement, ordinary and affectionate. Again, this is not spectacle, it is intimacy. It is the kind of touch that says, without saying much at all, the matter is settled between us. You need not fear. Let that movement become real enough to change the breath. Notice the breath now. It is different. It is not the breath of someone waiting for a message, waiting for reassurance, waiting to be selected. It is the breath of someone already at rest in love. The lungs do not brace in the same way. The chest does not tighten around uncertainty in the same way. The body itself begins to understand what chosen feels like. That is important. I want the body to learn it, not merely the mind, the body, because when the body knows, and then life must answer from there. Now, perhaps if it feels natural, another small scene may arise from the same state. Not a different story, just the same atmosphere from another angle. You are seated beside the one who loves you. Nothing is being proved, nothing is being discussed. The peace of the bond is enough. The shoulder of the beloved is near. Or perhaps your head rests lightly against that shoulder. No words are needed. The calm itself is the proof. If this scene comes too much, return to the hand. The hand is enough. The hand held in peace. The voice saying, I choose you, or I'm here. Do not complicate the act. Simplicity enters sleep more easily. Now let an inward phrase arise, something tied to completion, something that can be used gently with the scene. Perhaps I am chosen. Perhaps I am. Let it be the decree that belongs to this emotional chamber. I am chosen. Or I am loved and safe. Say it inwardly. Now, slowly, while the hand is still being held. Let the sentence and the sensation marry each other. Let the words awaken the state, and let the state give life to the words. Again, I am chosen. The hand is warm. The chest is softer. The voice is near. There is nothing. The bond is secure. This is how love is entered as a state. Not by begging the world to send someone quickly, not by staring at absence, not by rehearsing longing, but by entering the emotional climate of already being chosen. The universe answers state. It answers the one who already is. So tonight, you do not pray as one abandoned. You enter the feeling of one already held. And if some old memory whispers, you are not chosen, do not argue with it on its own ground. Return instead to the scene, the hand, the warmth, the voice, the decree. Let the old fear become less interesting than the new state. That is all. No violence, no battle, simply preference for the fulfilled condition. Now let the feeling deepen very slightly. Chosen does not mean excited. Chosen means secure. Chosen means no longer bargaining inwardly for permission to relax. Chosen means the end of emotional homelessness. Let the body feel what that means. The shoulders lower, the breath widens, the jaw softens, the chest opens without effort, the belly no longer tightens against possible rejection. This is chosen. Stay there a little longer. Your hand is held. The voice says, I choose you. The body yields into safety. You are loved. You are chosen. You are safe. And now again, let the scene become smaller, if it wishes. Perhaps now it is only the warmth of the hand and the words, I am chosen. Perhaps only the voice saying, I'm here, and the feeling of safety in the chest. Let it become compact enough to carry into sleep. The subconscious loves what is simple and alive. Again, the hand, the nearness, the safety, the quiet bond. I am loved and safe. No drama, no striving, no fear. Only the fulfilled emotional fact. Love can be entered as a state tonight. And now you know a little more clearly what chosen feels like. Not as an idea, but as a sensation in the body, a softness in the heart, a quietness in the breath. Remain there now. Now let us go deeper still, beyond money, beyond love, beyond any single outer condition, and come to the place from which all conditions take their color. For a man may receive money and still inwardly remain poor. A woman may be loved and yet still inwardly feel unchosen. A circumstance may improve while the self-concept remains old. And if the self-concept remains old, the old harvest will eventually. Do not think of this mirror as something strange or mystical in a distant sense. Think of it as the symbolic face of your own consciousness. The world has always mirrored you, but tonight you will turn from the outer mirror to the inner one. And in that inner mirror, you will not examine your features. You will examine your naming. You will see what you have been calling yourself in secret, and you will step out of it. Let the body remain soft. Let the breath remain. Let the world around you recede a little further. And now imagine, very simply, that before you there stands a tall mirror. It is plain, clear, silent. There is nothing theatrical about it. It is only there, waiting, faithful, still. The room around it is dim and peaceful, not dark with fear, but soft with inwardness. This is not a room of judgment. This is a room of truth. Let your presence be felt before it. And as you stand, do not look at your face first. Look instead at what hovers upon the surface of the mirror, faint at first, then clearer. Words, not words spoken aloud to the world, but words you have spoken inwardly to yourself. Words that have lived quietly in the background. Words that have followed I am, or whispered themselves through I can't. Perhaps you see there, lightly written, or I can't change, or I can't be loved, or I can't hold on to anything good, or I can't trust life, or I can't rest, or perhaps something more private, more subtle, a sentence you have worn so long it feels like your own skin. Let only one sentence appear. One is enough. One old naming. One quiet wound made into identity. Do not be afraid of seeing it. To see it is already. You are not here to add shame to the old burden. Shame is only another state. No, you are here to recognize what has been worn, and to realize that what has been worn may be removed. The sentence is not your essence. It is only a garment long used. It is habit made intimate. It is repetition mistaken for self. Now look at that old sentence on the mirror and feel gently how familiar it has been. Feel how often it has spoken, how many choices it has bent, how many reactions it has shaped. This is not to trouble you. It is to free you. Because when the hidden sentence is seen, it no longer moves in darkness with the same power. The one who sees it begins to stand apart from it. Now very gently, lift your hand in imagination and place it on the mirror where the sentence appears. Feel the cool surface under your palm. Feel the quiet authority in that you are simply touching the place where the old name has lived. And as your hand rests there, say inwardly, slowly, with deep calm, that is not who I am. Again, that is not who I am. Feel what those words do, not as argument, as release. You are not trying to persuade the old sentence to vanish through force. You are withdrawing belief. You are withdrawing identity. You are separating yourself from the old name. Now, as you keep your hand there, Imagine the old words beginning to fade, not violently, not dramatically. They soften the way mist softens in morning light. They lose their darkness. They begin to thin. The sentence that once felt so fixed begins to reveal itself as no more substantial than condensation on glass. It was fed by repetition. It was given life by consent. But now consent is being with I can't becomes less solid. The old inner verdict becomes less believable. The sentence that ruled from shadow begins to dissolve in the simple light of awareness. Do not rush. Let the fading be slow enough to feel merciful. You are not being torn away from yourself. You are being released from a false garment. And now, in the clean space where the old words have faded, something else may appear. Not by force, by choice. This is where the new self-concept is written, not as future promise, as present identity. Choose now one simple naming that feels like the next true self, not too complicated, not ornamental, one living sentence. I am able, I am chosen, I am secure, I am provided for, I am peaceful, I am free, I am loved, I am enough. Choose the one that carries the deepest medicine for you. Now let those new words appear upon the mirror, clear and quiet. I am chosen, or I am secure, or I am free, or whichever sentence you have chosen. See how different these words feel upon the glass. They do not accuse, they do not diminish, they do not drag the old story behind them. They are not desperate, they are calm. They are not asking permission to exist, they are written as fact. Let the eye rest. And now ask yourself very gently, what would it feel like if this were not merely a sentence on a mirror, but the quiet truth of your being? What would the body do? How would the chest feel? How would the breath move? How would the face soften? How would the inner voice sound if this naming were already natural? Let the answer come not as thought, but as sensation. If you are secure, the body does not brace in the same way. If you are chosen, if you are free, the mind does not tighten in the same way. If you are enough, the soul does not beg in the same way. Let the new naming begin to touch the body. This is crucial. The mirror is not for the mind alone. It is for the whole self. The new identity must begin to be felt, not admired. Now look again at the mirror. You see yourself there, but something in the posture has changed. Perhaps the shoulders are lower, not because you are trying to look transformed, but because the inner naming has changed, and the body always follows naming. The new self is not performing peace, it is resting in it. The new self is not trying to be enough, it knows itself as enough. The new self is not hoping one day to become, it is already clothed in I am. Now I want you to do something very simple and very powerful. Step into the mirror. Do not move forward gently as though the surface of the mirror was soft water, and you can pass through it without resistance. Step into the image, step into the naming, step into the posture, step into the breath, step into the identity. And now you are no longer seeing the new self. You are being it. Feel that. The room is now around you from the new identity. The breath is moving in the new identity. The body is resting in the new identity. The new sentence is within you. Now say your chosen I am sentence inwardly again, but no longer as one reading it from the mirror. Say it as one who is, slowly, softly, naturally. I am chosen, or I am secure, or I am free. Let it come from within the chest. Let it come from the center. Let it sound less like speech and more like recognition. There is no delay. There is no begging. It is immediate. It is inhabitation. It is creation. Now notice the old phrase, I can't. Try to find it. It does not fit here. It sounds foreign in this room. It sounds like a voice from another floor of the house. It no longer belongs in the mouth of this self. You do not need to argue against it. You have outgrown it. That is all. It belonged to another state. This is another. Remain there for a few moments and feel the naturalness of the new identity. This is important. We do not want to make it dramatic. Drama belongs to transition. Naturalness belongs to acceptance. The new identity must feel less like an act and more like a room you have entered, less like a performance and more like home. Now create one tiny scene from this identity. A small morning moment, perhaps. You wake tomorrow, not as effort, as fact. You sit up with a different inward posture. The mind does not say, I can't. The chest does not sink into the old weight. Instead, there is a quiet knowing, I am, and your chosen state. You move toward the day, not as one trying to change, but as one already changed within. Or perhaps imagine yourself meeting a familiar challenge tomorrow, something that usually wakes the old sentence. In the old identity, it would have triggered shrinking. But now, from the new identity, you remain different. You are steady, you are able, you are chosen, you are secure. The world has not yet fully rearranged, perhaps, but your state has, and therefore the whole meaning of the moment is altered. Let this little morning scene be brief, then return to the mirror, if you wish. But now the mirror only reflects what you are already becoming. They are in the nervous system, in the chest, in the breath, in the body's response to life. And now let there be one final act of revision. Hear the old inner voice once more, very faintly, as though from a distance. I can't. Then answer it not harshly, but with the new identity, I am. Let that be enough. Again the old whisper rises faintly, I can't. And again the new self, not by endless combat, but by repetition of a truer name, until the old one becomes strange. Now perhaps a quiet gratitude rises, not gratitude for some outer thing yet, but gratitude for release, gratitude for not being required to carry the old self to bed again, gratitude for the freedom to enter another naming. If it feels natural, whisper inwardly, thank you, or simply breathe the gratitude.
Marcus Weeks here. Before this video comes to a close, I want to step out of the lecture atmosphere for a few moments and speak to you directly, not in the voice of Neville Goddard, but in my own voice as someone who has spent a great many years studying his work, living with it, testing it, and trying to understand what he was truly pointing to beneath the language, beneath the examples, and beneath the mystical tone that so many people quote but so few really penetrate. My name is Marcus Weeks. I am from Barbados. I am 52 years old. I have spent a very long time studying Neville Goddard, not casually, not as a passing interest, but deeply, seriously, and with the kind of attention that only comes when something speaks to you at the level of identity. I am also the creator of this channel, The Codes of Neville. I started this channel because, over time, I came to feel that Neville's message had become diluted online. Too much of it was being turned into noise, stripped of its depth, oversimplified, sensationalized, or mixed with ideas that sounded similar on the surface but missed the real structure of what he was teaching. I felt his work needed a change. It needed someone who actually understood the psychology, the spiritual mechanics, the precision of the law, and the inner discipline beneath the words. So that is why this channel exists. And because this audio is placed near the end of the video, I want to use these next minutes to tell you what I believe this particular piece is really doing, beyond the title, beyond the hook, and beyond the surface promise. Because the title says, "Hear this while you sleep and force the universe to respond." And if you are not careful, especially in the current climate of online manifestation content, you could hear that title in a shallow way. You could hear it as emotional force. You could hear it as tension. You could hear it as some sort of desperate attempt to push reality around through sheer desire. But that is not Neville. That has never been Neville. The first thing I want to say in this analysis is that the video is not really teaching force in the ordinary sense. It is redefining force in Neville's sense. In Neville's world, you do not force reality by strain. You force it by entering the causal state that leaves the outer world no alternative but correspondence. That is a completely different thing. In other words, the universe is not compelled because you become intense. It is compelled because you become inwardly finished. The title sounds aggressive, but the real power of the teaching is actually quiet. It is a quiet inevitability. It is law. It is the same way a mirror is forced to reflect what stands before it. Not because you threaten the mirror, but because the mirror has no choice. That to me is one of the most important things this video is trying to communicate. The second thing I would say is that this video is built around a very important reversal, and Neville lived on reversals. He constantly took what the ordinary mind assumed and turned it inside out. The ordinary mind says effort produces results. Neville says state produces results. The ordinary mind says time creates change. Neville says accepted state begins the change at once, and time only measures the bridge of incidents. The ordinary mind says sleep is passive. Neville says sleep is one of the most fertile creative chambers in human experience. The ordinary mind says repeat enough words and something will happen. Neville says words without feeling are dead. Feeling is the secret. So what this video is doing, if you listen properly, is slowly dismantling the modern reflex to force with tension and replacing it with Neville's much deeper idea of forcing through assumption. Another important layer in this video is the way it shifts responsibility without creating shame. And that is something I think a lot of people miss when they talk about Neville. Some hear him and become hard on themselves. They think if my life is a reflection of my state, then every painful thing that has happened is somehow a reason to blame myself. But Neville is not offering shame. He is offering authorship. That is a very different thing. Shame paralyzes. Authorship liberates. Shame says you are bad for having created badly. Authorship says if state created this, then state can create differently. And this video, especially in the middle sections, does a good job of taking the listener out of helplessness and moving them toward operant power without turning the whole thing into self-punishment. That balance matters. I also think the treatment of time in this video is very important. Neville was absolutely uncompromising on this point. Time is not the creative force. Men worship time because they are frightened of immediate responsibility. If they can say, "This may happen one day," then they can remain psychologically separate from the thing they claim to desire. But Neville says the act is immediate. The acceptance is immediate. The bridge unfolds in time, yes, but the causal act itself is immediate. So when the video says the universe can respond quickly, that is not really a cheap promise about instant results. It is a statement about the immediacy of the law once the state is accepted. The problem is not usually that the law is slow. The problem is that people return to doubt, return to measurement, return to the senses, and then wonder why the harvest appears delayed. That is a major Neville point, and I think this video handles that well. Another thing that stands out to me is the way the subconscious is described, not merely as a vague mystical force, but as a womb. That is deeply Nevillian language. The subconscious receives and reproduces. It does not judge the seed. It does not care whether you planted fear or peace, resentment or relief, lack or abundance. It simply brings forth after its kind. That is why the emotional tone before sleep matters so much. And I think this is one of the strongest practical elements in the entire piece. It teaches the listener that what they carry into sleep is not harmless. It is not just emotional residue. It is often an act of conception. That idea alone, if truly understood, can change the way a person approaches the final minutes of the day for the rest of their life. I also want to point out the importance of the short phrase or decree in the structure of the video. A lot of people misunderstand Neville here as well. They think the phrase itself is magical. But the phrase is not the power. The phrase is only a vessel. The power is the state it awakens. That distinction is absolutely critical. You can repeat beautiful affirmations all day long and remain inwardly unchanged. In that case, the subconscious has not been deeply impressed. But one short phrase, if it carries the emotional atmosphere of completion, can outweigh 1,000 repetitions spoken from lack. This is why the video keeps returning to simplicity. Few words, deep feeling. Not request, but decree. That is very true to Neville's psychology. The money seen in the video is also worth commenting on because it does something subtle that many manifestation scripts get wrong. It does not make wealth feel like greed, excitement, or fantasy. It makes wealth feel like relief, and that is psychologically accurate. Relief is often a much truer doorway into abundance than excitement. Excitement can still contain separation. Relief implies completion. Relief says, the burden is lifted, the matter is settled. I think that is one of the most intelligent choices in the guided portion. The same is true of the love scene. Love is not presented as drama, obsession, or emotional intensity. It is presented as calm union, as being chosen, as emotional safety. Again, that is very Neville. Neville was not really teaching emotional frenzy. He was teaching naturalness. The fulfilled state is usually quieter than people expect. That is one of the hardest things for modern listeners to understand. They keep waiting to feel fireworks. Neville is trying to teach them to feel normality, to feel the settled naturalness of already having. This video leans into that idea, and that is one of its strengths. I also appreciate the inclusion of revision. If I were to summarize Neville's deepest psychological mercy in one word, it might be revision, because revision means the past is not as fixed as the senses claim. The event may have happened one way outwardly, but the emotional meaning we continue to carry is still active now, and because it is active now, it can be changed now. Revision is not denial. It is redemption. It is the reclaiming of emotional authorship. In practical terms, it stops people from going to bed each night, still loyal to an old wound. And if that old wound keeps being taken into sleep, it keeps being reseeded. So the revision section in a sleep-based Neville piece is not optional in my view. It is essential. Then there is the bridge of incidents. This to me is where many people fall apart in real life. They can imagine. They can even feel the state for a little while. But when life starts moving in unexpected ways, they panic. They want the route to look exactly like the fulfillment from the first moment. And that is not how Neville taught it. He taught that once the end is accepted, the bridge begins. But the bridge may wear strange clothing. It may look like delay. It may look like disruption. It may look like something ending. It may look like redirection. So the purpose of a section like that is not merely explanatory. It is emotional inoculation. It teaches the listener not to sabotage the process by misreading movement. I would also say that the identity section, the mirror section, is one of the deepest parts of the whole script structure. Because in the end, Neville was never only teaching people to get things, he was teaching them to become inwardly different. If the self-concept remains untouched, then outer changes are often temporary or unstable. But if I can't becomes I am, then creation begins at a different root. That is why I always say that Neville is not really a technique teacher in the shallow sense. He is an identity teacher. Techniques only matter insofar as they move identity. And this brings me to one last thing I want to say about the video as a whole. The real power of a sleep-based Neville piece is not in the information. It is in the descent. The piece must gradually lower the guard of the analytical mind and carry the listener from thought into state. If it remains too intellectual the whole way through, it may be interesting, but it will not be as effective. If it becomes too vague or too modern in its language, it may sound soothing, but it will lose Neville's precision. What I think this kind of script must do, and what I always aim for in material on this channel, is preserve the doctrinal depth while also making the listener soft enough to receive it. That is why tone matters so much. That is why pacing matters so much. That is why repetition matters so much. Not because repetition is magic, but because repetition can become a cradle. It can lower resistance. It can quiet argument. It can let meaning sink beneath the surface. And once that happens, the listener is no longer just hearing Neville. They are entering him. They are entering the law as state. So if you have stayed with me this far, I want to leave you with this thought. Do not measure the value of this kind of video only by whether you feel inspired in the moment. Inspiration is cheap if it does not alter state. Ask instead whether something in you became quieter, more inwardly complete, more willing to stop forcing and start assuming. Ask whether the body softened. Ask whether the old urgency lost some of its grip. Ask whether the end began to feel a little more natural. Those are better signs. Those are more Nevillian signs. My name is Marcus Weeks. I am from Barbados. I am 52 years old. I have spent many years studying Neville Goddard, and I created the Codes of Neville because I wanted a space where these teachings would be handled with seriousness, clarity, psychological depth, and real respect for what Neville was actually saying. If this analysis has helped you hear the video more deeply, then that means I have done what I hope to do. And now, since this comes near the end, let me close in a way that fits the spirit of everything you have just heard. Do not leave this as theory. Do not admire it and then return unchanged to the old inner conversation. Take one thing from it tonight, one state, one feeling, one decree, one act before sleep, and let that be enough. The law does not ask for noise, it asks for reality. The subconscious does not ask for speeches, it asks for feeling. The universe does not respond to strain, it responds to accepted state. So rest now in that. Let the teaching do its deeper work. Let sleep carry it further. And if the state has truly been accepted, the world in its own faithful way will answer.
The new words clear upon the glass. You step into them. You become them. You say them inwardly. You rest in them. Again, very softly, the old words fade. The new words appear. You step into them. You say, I am. You feel the body accept it. You rest. Again, the old self loosens. The mirror clears. The new identity stands before you. You enter it. You breathe as it. You say, I am. You rest. Stay there now, until this begins to feel less like imagination and more like naming, less like effort and more like simple truth. You are no longer the old self in this hour. The new identity is becoming natural. The old sentence is fading. The new I am is taking root. And if sleep is near, let the last inward sound be that new naming. Let the subconscious receive it not as a wish, but as identity. Let the old self remain outside. The new identity is becoming natural. I am. Now let us take away one more burden from the old self, and it is a burden that has troubled many who begin to understand this law. They assume the end. They enter the state. They feel the reality of the wish fulfilled. And then the next morning or the next week, they become frightened by movement. Life begins to stir. And because it does not all, perhaps I imagined incorrectly. Perhaps this change, this delay, this closing, this interruption means I have failed. But no, often it means the bridge has begun. So now I want to teach you how to feel safe while the unseen arranges itself. I want you to understand, not merely with the mind, but with the deeper body, that you do not need to control the route. You do not need to force the path. The bridge of incidents belongs to the law, not to your anxious planning. Imagine now that you stand beside a quiet stretch of water. It is not violent water. It is calm, dark, deep, almost still. On the far side is the life already accepted within you, not as a dream, not as something hoped for, but as the state you have entered. Provision, love, security. You simply know that on the far side is the fulfilled state. Now, in the old way of living, the mind would look at the water and become troubled. It would ask at once, how shall I cross? Where is the bridge? Why is it not already visible? What if I step wrongly? What if I am delayed? What if the path does not appear in the form I prefer? That is the voice of the old self. Tonight you are learning another posture entirely. So stand quietly at the edge of the water and do not strain to see the whole crossing. The whole crossing is not your concern. The end is your concern. The state is your concern. The bridge belongs to the unseen wisdom that responds once the end is accepted. So now, as you stand there in imagination, feel that something beneath appearance, but something is moving, something is arranging, something is preparing the path while you stand in trust rather than fear. Now imagine, very gently, that just before you, one stone rises above the surface of the water. Only one, not the whole bridge, not a full road revealed from shore to shore. One stone, solid, quiet, enough for the next step. One seeming interruption, one opening, one closure, one quiet step that makes room for the next. Feel what the old self would do. The old self would complain. One stone is not enough. I need the whole route. I need guarantees. I need visible proof that everything beyond this point will unfold exactly as I wish. But that is not trust. That is still. Let that settle into you. If the end is already mine, then the next step is enough. Now place your foot upon that first stone. Feel that it holds. Feel that your weight is supported. Feel that you do not fall. That is important. The unseen is not asking you to leap blindly into chaos. It is asking you to trust that when the end is accepted, the next incident will support the journey. Now another stone rises a little farther on, then another. They do not appear all at once. They appear as needed. This is how the bridge of incidents forms, not as a completed map handed to the senses, but as a living sequence revealed to the one who remains loyal to the end. The bridge grows under the feet of faith, not before the eyes of fear. And now let me show you something important. One may look like an unexpected conversation. One may look like a door closing. One may look like a detour. One may look like an ending. One may look like a change in plans you would not have chosen. And this is where many become frightened, because they judge the step before they have crossed it. But life under the law is often like that. The bridge does not always flatter the senses. It serves the end. What looks like closing may be redirection. What looks like interruption may be the exact rearrangement required for the fulfilled state to appear. The bridge is not built for your comfort at every moment of the crossing. It is built for your arrival. That is why you must not worship the appearance of each step. You must remain faithful to the shore you have already inwardly reached. So now imagine that one of the stones, perhaps it is marked by change, perhaps by uncertainty, perhaps by the feeling that life is moving in a way you did not plan. But do not fear it. Stand upon it and say inwardly, this too may serve the end. Again, this too may serve the end. Feel how much quieter the body becomes when you stop demanding that every event look immediately pleasant before you trust it. Another feels like a new idea. Another feels like an impulse within yourself to speak, to go, to write, to respond, to decline, to accept. Yes, the bridge may move through you as well as around you. The unseen may arrange people and circumstances, but it may also arrange your own movements from within. You may suddenly feel drawn toward something, or gently warned away from something. Do not imagine that the bridge is always external. Consciousness moves both the world and the one who walks through it. So now feel yourself becoming more comfortable with not knowing the entire route. This is a great freedom. The old self believed it must carry the whole architecture of the future in its worried mind. The new self knows that the law arranges what the anxious mind could never invent. You are. The bridge belongs to the unseen. Say inwardly now, slowly, I do not need to control the route. Again, I do not need to control the route. Let that sentence loosen something in the chest. Let it soften the old burden of planning and forcing and anticipating every turn. Again, I do not need to control the route. Now say the unseen is already arranging it. Feel what that, not that you are waiting helplessly, but that the moment the end was accepted, hidden movements began. Thoughts in others, meetings, timings, opportunities, shifts, closures, openings. All the quiet machinery of the bridge began its labor. The senses are often late to recognize it, but the unseen is already arranging it. Again, the unseen is already. The body becomes less afraid of uncertainty, because uncertainty is no longer empty. It is occupied by law. It is held by the bridge. The water beneath you may still be deep, but it no longer threatens you in the same way, because the next support always appears. Not always before you want it, but always in the sequence required. And now let the far shore draw a little nearer in feeling. You are being carried toward it by obedience to the law already set in motion. You may even feel at certain moments that the bridge itself is carrying you. That is not foolishness, it is an emotional truth. Once the end is accepted, you are no longer generating the crossing with anxious force. You are being moved through a lawful unfolding. So feel that now. You are carried by the bridge. Again, I do not need to control the route. Again, this too may serve the end. Let these become little inward assurances, not shouted, but breathed. Now imagine you are nearly across. You do not yet need to arrive in full detail. What matters is that your relationship to the crossing has changed. You no longer curse the process. You no longer require the whole map. You no longer. You understand now that the bridge of incidents may wear ordinary clothing. It may come as natural events. It may disguise itself as coincidence. It may even at first look like inconvenience. But if you remain loyal to the end, you will later look back and see that every step had its place. This is why impatience must soften. Impatience belongs to the one who still believes he must force the world to reveal everything. So now let trust enter the body. Let it be felt not as passivity, but as inner safety. Safe in uncertainty, safe in movement, safe in not yet seeing the whole bridge, safe because the unseen is already arranging what the seen will later reveal. Now let the crossing become simpler, more sleep-like. Perhaps now it is only this. One step appears. You breathe, and another step rises. You trust, and the path answers. One step held, another step held. The unseen is already arranging it. I do not need to control the route. Again, a step appears. You stand upon it, another appears. You are carried. The unseen is already arranging it. I do not need to control the route. Stay with that until the body begins to understand that the law does not require your control of the path, only your loyalty to the end. You do not need to control the route. The unseen is already arranging it. The bridge is already forming. Each step will appear. You are safe in the unfolding, and remain there now, crossing gently, feeling yourself carried toward what has already been accepted within. Now, before we go deeper into the silence of sleep, I want to free you from one more burden, one that many carry into the night without knowing how heavily it shapes tomorrow. I speak of an old conversation, an old scene, a memory that still lives with feeling, not because it happened once, but because it continues to happen inwardly every time it is remembered in the old way. The past survives as feeling, and what survives? So tonight, very gently, I ask you to allow one old relational wound to come near. Do not choose the whole history of your life. Do not drag 1,000 scenes before the mind. One is enough. One conversation, one look, one silence, one moment that carried sting, rejection, embarrassment, hurt, dismissal, misunderstanding, or loss. Something that still. You are not here to suffer it again. You are here to redeem it. Let it appear as though you were looking at it through a little distance, almost as if it were a scene on a stage, or a page in a book you once read. Enough to recognize it, no more than that. Now notice what it has carried for you. Perhaps the chest tightens, perhaps the stomach hardens, perhaps the face grows tense, perhaps there is a familiar. This is the emotional residue. This is the living part of the past, not the event itself. The event is gone, but the feeling has remained active, and because it has remained active, it has kept asking life to echo it in new forms. This is why revision is mercy. Revision does not deny that the scene seemed to happen. Revision changes the feeling with which it is carried. And when the feeling changes, you are not a prisoner of history. You are only held by the emotional meaning you still breathe into it. Tonight we withdraw that old meaning and we place another there. So let the scene become still for a moment, almost frozen. There it is, the old conversation, the old moment, the old tone, the old wound. It no longer gets to move on its own. You hold it now. What would have made this moment feel whole, dignified, kind, resolved? Not what should have happened according to argument. What would have healed it in feeling? Perhaps you needed to hear, I understand. Perhaps you needed to hear, I am sorry. Perhaps you needed warmth where there was coldness. Perhaps you needed a soft tone where there was sharpness. Perhaps you needed respect where there was humiliation. Perhaps you needed to feel chosen where you felt dismissed. Let the answer come simply. One line is enough. One gesture is enough. One small change in tone is often enough. The subconscious does not require a long rewriting. It needs the new emotional fact. Now let the old frozen scene begin again, but differently. Keep it small. Keep it gentle. The tension is gone. The voice that once wounded now speaks with kindness, or honesty, or calm recognition. The scene begins to turn. Hear the words you needed. I am sorry. I did not mean to hurt you. You matter to me. I understand now. You are safe. I am here. Let us begin again. Choose what belongs to your healing. Let it be natural. The more ordinary it feels, the more deeply the subconscious receives it. Now notice your own body as you hear the new words. The chest begins to loosen. The throat softens. The old inward flinch begins to lessen. This is important. Revision is not mental editing only. It is emotional replacement. The body must begin to feel a different ending. If the old scene was if it was one of fear, now let protection be present. If it was one of shame, now let gentleness be present. If it was one of loss, now let restoration be present. You do not need to overwork this. One true shift in feeling is enough. Now let yourself answer in the revised scene, but not as the old wounded self. Answer as the self who is already calmer. Perhaps you say nothing at all because the peace itself is enough. Let your reply be brief. Let it belong to dignity, not desperation. And now let the revised scene end in peace. This matters. Do not let it drift back into confusion. End it well. End it kindly. End it in the emotional atmosphere you wish to carry forward. A soft look, a settled tone. Feel that peace now. Stay there a little. Let the body receive the new ending. Let the chest know that the conversation does not have to keep ending in hurt. Let the nervous system know that the scene no longer threatens in the same way. Let the deeper self know that the past has been revised in feeling. Now, if the old scene tries to return in its former shape, do not wrestle with it. Simply lay the new one over, not by one dramatic effort, but by quiet replacement until the new emotional truth feels more real than the old wound. So let us repeat the revised moment once more. The old scene appears, but now the tone is kind. Now the words are healing. Now dignity is present. Now your body softens. Now the scene ends in peace. Again, the old conversation no longer. The past is being rewritten in feeling. This is not falsehood. This is liberation. The outer event belonged to one level of experience, but the emotional meaning has remained in your keeping. And tonight you choose another meaning. This is why revision works. The subconscious does not distinguish between what once appeared outwardly and what is now inwardly felt with reality. It accepts the now let that truth settle more deeply. The old conversation no longer owns you. It no longer has the right to keep reproducing itself in your chest, in your relationships, in your assumptions about yourself. The old scene had power only because it remained alive as present feeling. And now the feeling is changing. Therefore, the future it would have produced must change too. If it helps, imagine that the old memory is like ink in water, slowly dissolving, losing its darkness, becoming lighter and lighter as the new feeling spreads through it. Or imagine it as a room once cold, now warming, or a tense piece of music, now resolving into a gentler chord. However it comes, let the emotional residue be altered. Now perhaps you let it be a seal, not a strain, a seal of peace over the revised moment. It is healed. Again, it is at peace now. Again, it is done. And as you say it, let the body rest more deeply. Let the old charge continue to drain away. No need to analyze why it happened. No need to understand every detail. Analysis belongs to the old mind. We are choosing a different emotional past. This is one of the quiet miracles available to you, that the past as feeling need not remain as it was, that one old moment can lose its sting, that one old conversation can be rewritten in the heart, that one old wound can stop asking the world to confirm it again and again. This is freedom. So remain here. Let that be what you carry now, not the old version. Let that be the final taste. Let that be the thing sealed in the creative chamber tonight. And say inwardly now, very quietly, the old conversation no longer owns me. I can plant a different emotional past tonight. It is healed. It is at peace now. It is done. Stay there until the body believes it enough to softer in the body, softer in the breath, softer in the mind, softer in the way you are holding this moment. There is nothing more to solve now, nothing more to prove, nothing more to understand. The deeper work does not need more words. It needs your rest. Let the body grow heavier if it wishes. Let the breath slow in its own gentle way. Let the eyes remain closed without effort. Let the chest know that it no longer has to brace itself against tomorrow. Let the hands be still. Let the whole outer man become more and more willing to sleep. It is done. You need not make it done. You need not force it done. You need not check whether it is done. It is done. Let those words become simple now, not something to think about, only something to sink. Safe now in the state, safe now in the deeper self, safe now in this softness. Let the body hear that. Let the breath hear that. Let the heart hear that. You are safe. Again, you are safe. You already are. You do not need to become. You do not need to reach. You do not need to arrive. You already are. The old strain belonged to becoming. Nothing is missing. Nothing is missing now in the state. Nothing is missing in the deeper truth. The old mind searched and searched and searched, but now the search may rest. Nothing is missing. Let those words settle into the places that used to tighten, into the chest, into the belly, into the throat, into the little hidden corners of the body, where absence used to live. Nothing is missing. You do not need to make yourself believe through strain. The state is accepted. Let it be quiet. Let it be gentle. Let it be as simple as a blanket being laid over you. The state is accepted. Again, the state is accepted. The world will answer. You do not need to ask how. You do not need to ask when. You do not need to watch the door. You do not need to search the road. The world will answer. Again, the world will answer. Sleep will carry it deeper. You do not have to hold the state all night with effort. Sleep will carry it deeper. The deeper mind knows what to do. The subconscious knows how to receive. The night knows how to seal what has been accepted. You are not required to manage it. Sleep will carry it deeper. Again, sleep will carry it deeper. Rest in what has already been planted. Rest in what no longer needs your argument. Rest in what no longer asks for your strain. You may rest now. Again, you may rest now. It is done. You are safe. You already are. Nothing is missing. The state is accepted. The world will answer. Sleep will carry it deeper. You may rest now. Let the phrases grow lighter. You do not have to stay mentally awake for meaning. It is enough to let the feeling remain. It is enough to let the tone carry you. It is enough to let the body drift. It is done. You are safe. Nothing is missing. You already are. The state is accepted. The world will answer. Sleep will carry it deeper. You may rest now. And if thoughts still come, let them pass without the quiet certainty matters now. The old need to search, to inspect, to measure, to wonder may now loosen completely. No more searching, no more asking, no more straining, no more becoming. Only rest, only being, only the accepted state. It is done. You are safe. You already are. Nothing is missing. Let the breath move more. Let the night take you. The state is accepted. The world will answer. Sleep will carry it deeper. You may rest now. Again softly, it is done. You are safe. Nothing is missing. You already are. The state is accepted. The world will answer. Sleep will carry it deeper. You may rest now. If the body grows heavier, let it grow heavier. There is nothing left to impress. What needed to be planted has been planted. What needed to be accepted has been accepted. What needed to soften has softened. What needed to end has ended. It is done. The old effort is done. The old seeking is done. The old asking is done. The old becoming is done. It is done. You are safe enough now to stop. Nothing is missing. Not now. Not in this state. Not in this moment. Not in the deeper self. Nothing is missing. You already are. Already. 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 The thing is not far. The state is not tomorrow. The self is not ahead. You already are. The world will answer, quietly, naturally, in its own. Rest now. Rest now. It is done. You are safe. Nothing is missing. You already are. The state is accepted. The world will answer. Sleep will carry it deeper. You may rest now. And now let even these words become fewer inside you. It is done. You are safe. Already. Nothing is missing. Accepted. The world will answer. Deeper. The deeper self knows how to receive. The world knows how to answer. You do not need to help. You do not need to hurry. You do not need to check. You do not need to ask. You may rest now. It is done. You are safe. Nothing is missing. You already are. The state is accepted. The world will answer. Sleep will carry it deeper. You may rest now. Rest now. You already are. You may rest now.